If you guys enjoy what I do, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps the channel and it's free and easy to do. Before we get started with today's video, I have an announcement to make. After years of telling other people's stories, I finally released one of my own. My novel Eternal Reign is available now in both ebook and paperback format for those of you who are like me and prefer to collect physical media. You can grab a copy right now on Amazon through the link in the description of this video. And now back to our regularly scheduled program. In New York City on Christmas Eve in 1997, NYPD officer Aya Brea decides to go on a date with a guy because he keeps bothering her, and for some reason he thinks it's a good idea to take her to the opera. Not my thing, but to each his own. It starts off normal until the lead singer meets Aya's eyes, then people start to burst into flames. Aya, after shoulder checking her cowardly date out of the way, heads to the stage to confront the lead singer who is clearly responsible for the flaming deaths. The woman's confused about why Aya didn't catch on fire like the rest of the people, but then she realizes that Aya should be awakening soon since her cells are calling out to her. The woman's crazy, so Aya does the only sensible thing and shoots her. It doesn't do much, but that's clearly not the weirdest thing Aya has seen in New York City, so it doesn't seem to bother her all that much. But her body does start to get hot during the fight, but something inside of her stops her from bursting into flames. Something that the weird actress says will eventually make Aya like her. The actress calls herself Eve and seems surprised that Aya doesn't know her. She claims that Aya should know her well, which makes Aya see a vision of what looks like a hospital room, but instead of telling her what the vision was about, Eve floats backstage and blows a hole in the floor that Aya follows her into. The first thing she sees after jumping into a deep hole with heels on and not breaking her ankles is a young girl who runs off and disappears. Aya heads through the basement of the theater after Eve, who somehow mutates a rat into a dog-sized monster that tries to kill her. The sight freaks Aya out, but that doesn't make her hesitate to shoot the thing until it's not only creepy, but creepy and dead. Checking out the rest of the rooms, Aya finds a clown who runs out of the room and dies, a bunch of crispy actors, and a journal from the main actress. Her real name was Melissa, and the journal shows that she's been taking a lot of medication. The person who had been competing with her for the lead actress role burned to death in a fire not that long ago, and what's more important is that the lead actress gets a solo in Central Park on Christmas Day, which means Melissa, or Eve, needs to die before then. Fortunately, Aya finds her in the next room playing the piano and arguing with herself. She says some weird things about nucleic domination coming to an end. She evolves into a very weird long-armed woman thing, and she seems surprised that Aya hasn't changed too. She figures that she just needs more time for her mitochondria to be free, which is just as confusing to Aya as you might expect, but she gets another vision of a hospital room. This time there's a little girl laying on an operating table, and a doctor walks in before the vision ends. When it does, Aya is alone. Apparently Eve went through another hole in the floor that apparently goes all the way to the sewers because reasons. Aya sees that same little girl again, but she disappears. The fact that Aya thinks that's normal is a sign that she's kinda dumb, which is also the reason she's not scared to fight Eve alone. Even though if anyone else was there, they'd just catch on fire. Aya wants Eve to tell her why, but she says she'll figure it out later, and if she doesn't, her mitochondria will. According to Eve, they've always known. Since Aya doesn't even know what mitochondria are, it'll be a while before she understands anything. Eve leaves to give Aya time to evolve, but she leaves behind a giant crocodile that tries its best to eat her. Because bullets apparently pack way more punch in this world than they do in the real one, they actually work and Aya manages to kill the crocodile. We're not even going to try to figure out how Aya made it back up the hole into Carnegie Hall, but when she walks out of the building, a reporter's there and he bombards her with questions since she's the sole survivor of this horrible incident. She obviously doesn't want to talk to him, but reporters don't exactly respect personal space, so Aya's partner Daniel uses a bit of police brutality and punches the reporter, which solves the problem. He apologizes for being late, but had he been there, he'd have died. But he did hear that Aya's date had run out of the building screaming, which is kinda hilarious. But Aya doesn't care since she only went out with him because he kept bothering her. In case you didn't know, that's a terrible way to try to get a date. As for the opera, the only reason she went there is because she saw an ad in the paper that just caught her eye. Daniel says it must be her police instincts finally kicking in, but whatever led her there is clearly the start of what is going to be the longest week of all of their lives. After Aya gets some much needed rest, she heads to the station to get everyone up to speed since she's the only one who knows anything about what happened at the opera. Daniel had already done some research on Melissa, the actress who's calling herself Eve now. She has no relatives or close friends, and she was sick a lot, which explains the constant medications. The people at the opera were surprised that the woman could even stand long enough to sing. Her apartment burned down on that same night, so there's no way to find out what medication she was actually taking. Being antisocial and sick are pretty normal, but it doesn't explain how she was able to set people on fire with her mind. It's hard to believe at all. Even the captain can't believe that they're about to be dealing with a superpowered opera singer, but he still sends Aya to grab some heavier firepower from Taurus. The man runs the armory, but he's not that big of a fan of guns since his daughter was killed by one. Armed and ready, even though I don't see how a rifle is supposed to stop a bulletproof psychic, Aya runs into Ben, Daniel's son. The boy had come by to give his dad tickets to a concert, but with this new case, Daniel doesn't have time to go. He feels bad about it, but there's more important things to worry about at the moment. For starters, they have to deal with the press, and since Aya was the only survivor of the incident, Captain Baker wants her there. But he wants her to be quiet as much as possible, because the way the news works, they may try to make her into the bad guy. The press conference goes fine with the captain spinning a line of BS about chemical fires and such, but it immediately goes south when they ask Aya how she survived without even a burn, and she blurts out that Melissa said it was because her mitochondria were a mutation, and the actress Melissa had her body taken over by a monster called Eve. Baker runs the press off before he yells at Aya. Whether what she said was the truth or not is irrelevant. In the best case scenario, people will think she's lying and the police are behind the incident. Worst case scenario, people will believe her and she'll start a panic. Since scared people do really stupid things, that's a serious problem. His rant is interrupted by a phone call from a Japanese scientist who was talking about mitochondria and saying he's on his way over. All this talk about mitochondria reminds Nix that he recently read about a researcher at the museum who had a new theory about the mitochondria. After what Aya told the media, it won't take long before a few reporters go over there to pester the man, so Aya and Daniel head off to the museum to speak with Dr. Hans Klemp, who specializes in genetic research, and he works at the museum because he's not a big fan of people, which of course means he'll be overjoyed to talk to the two cops. I was being sarcastic. He's not eager to talk to them at all, but seeing his face triggers Aya's memories, and she sees Dr. Klemp standing over a girl in the hospital bed, which makes her think that she knows the man, but she can't quite remember from where. Antisocial or not, you can always get people to talk when you're asking about things that they're interested in. So when Daniel asks Klemp about his research and mentions the fact that the murderer thereafter said something about setting mitochondria free before burning people alive with her mind, he starts to talk. He's very unlikable, but he does tell you what mitochondria are. They are a part of each and every cell in the bodies of plants and animals and are responsible for creating the energy required for cells to function. Since they have their own DNA, they are basically a unique organism living inside of everything, a lot like a parasite. Granted, Dr. Klemp doesn't like it when Daniel calls them that, since humans can't exactly function without them. Without them, the human brain couldn't even function, and since they can produce over 200,000 volts of electricity or heat, if every mitochondria in the body activated at the same time, setting a human on fire would be pretty simple. They also control growth, aging, and evolution, and they grow and change at a rate 10 times as fast as a human. A scientist tried to chart how fast mitochondria mutated to help figure out just how old humans were. In the late 1980s, it was announced that the origins of humans could be traced back to a single woman in Africa, and they called the woman mitochondria Eve. After hearing that, Aya tells Klemp that the murderer called herself Eve, which makes him go quiet, and he refuses to say anything else, so the two cops leave, only to get a call telling them that they have a lead on Eve's location, and they need to get back to the station. Melissa had a solo concert scheduled for that day in Central Park. The concert got canceled, but this was before the age of cell phones, so people didn't know, and they've all gathered at the stage. The concert's in Central Park, the same place that Daniel's son was trying to get him to go with him and his ex-wife. Daniel races off to save them, and of course Aya goes with him, but he can't even make him past the park's gate without his body starting to burn, so it's up to Aya. The place is extremely dangerous since Eve has apparently taken over the mitochondria of the animals and caused them to mutate, but Aya makes it to the stage just in time to see the entire audience get liquefied by Eve. Aya chases after Eve, fighting a very giant worm before she catches up to the woman, and because Aya makes the best decisions, she hops in a carriage with the woman who promptly sets the horse on fire so it races down the street. Eve still doesn't understand why Aya is fighting her instead of working with her, since she should know who she is. But even though Aya doesn't seem to remember Eve, her body does, which is why she was drawn to the opera. Eve tries to talk to Aya's cells directly, saying that if the two of them join forces, all the mitochondria in the world will unite, but the horse finally dies and throws the carriage away from Eve, knocking Aya unconscious and causing her to see more visions of the hospital. Meanwhile, Daniel is still waiting for Aya at the entrance to the park when his son runs up. He had been with his mom, but she started to act weird. Ben had started to feel sick by the stage, so he ran away, but not before he saw his mom melt in the goo with the rest of the crowd. News of the massacre spreads fast, and since it's so much worse than what happened the night before, the orders come down to evacuate Manhattan while the cops stick around to fight Eve. Unfortunately, there's been no sign of Aya, so Daniel leaves his son at the station with Kathy while he goes off to search for her. To distract the boy, Kathy introduces him to Shiva, one of the oldest police dogs at the station. While Daniel's searching for Aya, Maeda, the Japanese scientist who was supposed to be on his way to the station, shows up, but the cops won't let him into the city. Fortunately for him, but not so much so for one of the cops, one of them bursts into flames and Maeda uses the distraction to run into the city. After having more dreams of the hospital, Aya wakes up in a bed in a very run-down bedroom with Maeda sitting on a couch watching TV. The man had found her and called the cops, so naturally Daniel shows up. He's a bit creeped out by how empty the city is, even though it's great for the traffic. Since he's finally found Aya, Daniel wants to know what happened in the park to the audience. When she tells them that the audience melted, Maeda says something really unexpected. He says that nothing like this happened in Japan, meaning this weird event isn't unique. It happened a few years ago on a smaller scale. It started when a scientist's wife had a car accident. The scientist tried to culture some liver cells to help keep her alive, and he named the cells Eve. The cells multiplied and the woman's mitochondria took over her body. After getting some sperm from her husband by means that we don't need to explain, Eve tried to give birth to an ultimate being, one whose body could contain her rapidly growing cells. Before her accident, the woman had been registered as an organ donor, so her kidneys got transplanted into a young girl that Eve put a fertilized egg in and used her to give birth to the ultimate being. But the creature didn't survive. The father's DNA didn't mesh with the creature, which is a good thing because there's no telling how powerful it would have been if it had survived. Maeda was interested in the scientist's research, so he went to the lab to see what he could learn, and when he heard about the incident in New York, he had to fly over. This stuff just keeps getting weirder and weirder, but Daniel's just happy that Aya's alive. He thought Eve had killed her, and Aya almost wishes that she had because with her immunity and what seems to be happening to her body, she thinks she might be a monster like Eve. If she is, she doesn't want to end up killing Daniel by accident, so she sends him away and tries to get some sleep because she's afraid of something else. When she touched Eve, it reminded her of her sister Maya, who had died in a car crash along with her mother. The next day, Aya steps outside of the room and finds Maeda hadn't left like she had told him to. He'd slept outside of the building despite what could have happened to him, and Daniel shows up because regardless of how Aya feels, Daniel's not worried about her hurting him by accident or on purpose. They have a monster to deal with, so after they raid the local gun shop, the trio head to the museum since it has a research facility that Maeda can use to test something that he thinks might be useful. And since Dr. Clamp should have been evacuated by now with everyone else, they shouldn't have to deal with the overly annoying man. Maeda had took some goo from Aya's clothing that he thinks came from Eve, and he wants to see how strong her power is on the cellular level, since the body that she's controlling should be breaking down. First, he runs the test on his own blood, letting Aya see how Eve's cells attach to them and completely take over his. That's likely what happened to the animals that had attacked Aya. Normally, mitochondria never have the power to take over a cell, but Eve seemed to have evolved into something else entirely. Normally, those cells work in harmony with the other cells in the body, both keeping one another alive, but now Eve can just take over cells and siphon off what she needs. Aya is curious to see what happens when her own cells come in contact with Eve's, that way she can at least get an idea as to why she can fight the woman. When Eve's cells try to take over Aya's, her mitochondria give her cells more energy so they can fight the woman off. That explains how Aya is able to fight her, but that doesn't explain why her body evolved in a way to counter Eve's. Maeda has theories, but they don't get to discuss them before Clamp comes in. And of course, he's not happy to see them in his lab, but he is curious about Aya's cells and what's happening to her body once he looks under the microscope. He starts to question her, but Daniel sees a list of names on Clamp's computer, including both his ex-wife and his son. He was going to beat some answers out of the man, but Aya talks him down and they all leave. Maeda saw the list. It was a list that was used to determine if an organ donor would be a match for someone else. Daniel knows that Clamp is up to something, and he decides it's time to head back to the station to get permission to arrest the man. But when they get to the station, it's been attacked, and Aya gets the feeling that Eve is nearby. Daniel races off to find his son, and Aya follows him after Maeda gives her a good luck charm to waste inventory space. Things have gone bad for the NYPD. Cops are dead all over the place, including Torres, who couldn't bring himself to fire a gun even with his life in danger. And those that aren't dead are in pretty bad shape,
but things get serious when Kathy tells Aya that Shiva went crazy and ran off, and Daniel's son chased after her. The dog is clearly about to change into a monster, and she's trying to escape before she hurts Ben, but he doesn't realize it. Lucky for him, Captain Baker grabs the boy right before Shiva turns into a monster from Stranger Things. Unfortunately, Baker doesn't have the bullets to kill the elephant-sized three-headed dog. Aya makes it there just in time to deal with the dog before it can kill them. Baker's hurt, but not fatally, and he did manage to keep Ben safe, something that Daniel is extremely grateful for. With the captain injured, Daniel is put in charge, and the first thing he wants to find out is why Eve decided to attack the police station, especially since they haven't exactly been a threat to her. He figures that Maeda might have an idea. Aya wants to know why Eve didn't show up herself this time. She only felt the woman for a moment before she vanished. Maeda thinks it was a distraction, something to keep them busy while Eve hunted down a sperm bank. Her body likely won't last much longer, so Maeda thinks she's going the route of her predecessor in Japan and trying to give birth to an ultimate being. The nearby St. Francis Hospital had a doctor that specialized in artificial insemination, so Aya and Maeda head there, leaving Daniel behind so he can look into Dr. Clamp, because he knows the man is involved somehow. It could be because the man gives off obvious bad guy vibes, or maybe he read the script. Either way, Aya and Maeda head to the hospital, and she realizes it's the one she had been seeing in her vision. The place makes Maeda feel hot when he gets next to the door, so after handing Aya another space-wasting charm, she heads inside alone. Eve makes her presence known very quickly by cutting the elevator cables when Aya gets into it, and cutting the power, forcing her to run around in the dark and fight monsters while hunting for a way to repair the power. Because it's a video game, she finds fuses in the area and uses them to restore the power, and she also saves a few doctors and patients who were still around. That leads her into the very room she'd seen in her odd memories, and she knows she was there, but she still can't remember why. The hospital staff point her in the direction of the liquid nitrogen storage that they use to keep the sperm in the sperm bank from spoiling, so Aya decides that it'll be a good idea to turn it off. That way Eve won't be able to get the baby batter that she needs. In the process, she finds the exact same donor list that had been on Dr. Clamp's computer, along with the patient records of her mother and her sister, who had been brought to the hospital on the same day as a girl named Melissa Pierce. An operation was done, but Aya doesn't know what it was because the pages were missing. So she heads up to the roof where she knows Eve is waiting. In the meantime, the Navy is sending out fighter jets to search for the people from Central Park. On the roof, Eve sends a giant spider at Aya, but apparently it exceeds the roof's weight limit and falls through it during the fight, giving Aya access to Eve. She's surprised to hear that Aya knows what she's doing and how her sister failed in Japan, but Eve considers herself to be more evolved than her sister, and she won't make the same mistake. While they're talking, the Navy's jets fly overhead, so Eve liquefies the pilots and causes the jets to come crashing down on the hospital's roof. Aya barely makes it off in time. Maeda and Daniel are waiting for her on the ground, where she has to let them know that she failed and Eve got away with what she needed. Daniel's got news of his own, which is why he even came to the hospital. Apparently, Melissa had been seen going in and out of the museum late at night on multiple occasions, which means Dr. Clamp had been working with Eve from the very beginning. The two of them have to be meeting somewhere soon, so Daniel sends everyone out to hunt around the city for the two of them, because if the ultimate being is born, there may be no way to stop it. While she's hunting for Eve, Aya comes across signs that the blob monster that had been made from the people in Central Park was moving through the sewers. She finds it in the process of moving into the water reservoir, which would probably be bad for people's health, so she flushes it out and chases it. After dealing with a giant centipede, because Eve seems to enjoy mutating the most disgusting creatures she can find, Aya sees the slime heading to the one place that she should have expected it to go, the museum. She races over there and catches sight of a man in a white lab coat, who is obviously Dr. Clamp, but her hunt is made a little more difficult by the fact that the alarm system has locked a lot of the doors, and Eve has somehow resurrected some of the dinosaur bones and sent them to kill Aya. She fights her way past giant scorpions, velociraptors, and other things that should have killed her, and she manages to turn off the alarm, giving her full access to most of the museum. Since she's still getting in the way, Eve decides to finish Aya off by using the remains of the people from Central Park to resurrect the T-Rex. Instead of fighting it, Aya avoids the King of the Beasts and heads to Clamp's lab because she figures he'll be there, but he's not. Maeda is. He had wanted to test something, so he'd gotten Daniel to bring him over while he went to look for something at the hospital, but he should be on his way back to the museum by now. Maeda found a blood serum with Maya's name on it in Clamp's freezer under some research labeled Eve. Apparently it was made from liver cells that he had been cultivating for years, but all the data on what he was doing has of course been deleted. Recently, the doctor switched and has been working on making artificial sperm for Eve, free of the male mitochondria, so the ultimate being that Eve has won't die in the same way as the one from Japan. Clamp shows up while Aya and Maeda are talking, and the guy starts ranting about the inferiority of humans and such. He's crazy, but he also knows that Aya has special powers. She's evolved that far, but she still has a human form. Since the alternative is her looking like Eve, she should be grateful. Regardless, he doesn't plan on letting her interfere with Eve's work. He goes to stab her, but Daniel comes in and saves her by punching the man in the face hard enough to put him to sleep for a few minutes. When he wakes up, he admits that he did remove the flaw that was in the ultimate being in Japan, so Eve's will be perfect when it's born. And it will be born soon since Eve is going through the fastest pregnancy in history. He's done his part, so he calls out to Eve to let her know that Aya and the others are in the room. As soon as she finds out, Eve causes the room to burst into flames, but not before Daniel and Maeda jump out of the window. They should still be very dead from hitting the ground from that height, but we're dealing with video game logic, so just roll with it. Clamp burns to death, and Aya heads to the top of the museum to deal with Eve once and for all, but she's attacked by a Triceratops. She beats it, but it tackles her over the side of the railing and she falls several floors. She doesn't come out of that unharmed, but her body heats up and heals itself, which is a good thing because the T-Rex sees her and attacks. Because her powers are growing, she defeats it and comes face to face with an extremely pregnant Eve. She gets ready to put Eve down, but the blob that had been the people from Central Park forms a really big human-looking thing and reaches through the wall to drag Eve to safety. Daniel and Maeda, who should be dead, are waiting outside of the museum for Aya, and they got a very good view of the disgusting creature. On a less important note, Maeda knows what medication Melissa was taking and why. She'd had a kidney transplant as a kid, and as luck would have it, she'd gotten the kidney from Aya's sister Maya. I just can't understand why the girl's parents were so lazy with the name choices. Naming one kid Aya, then just adding an M to the next kid's name just screams I'm lazy and don't care. Both Aya's mother and sister were organ donors, but her mother was too badly mangled after the car wreck to use her organs, but they were able to put Maya's kidney into Melissa, which is why she had to take the pills to keep her body from rejecting it. There was an intern who was there for the operation, and he was none other than Dr. Clamp, and he heard firsthand how the doctors who removed Maya's kidney screamed about how unusually hot it was. At that point, it was too late not to put it into Melissa, which led to Maya's mutated mitochondria eventually taking over the woman's body. She sped up the process by overdosing on the medication, which caused her immune system to weaken enough for Eve to fully take control. Technically, this means that Eve is Aya's sister. Meanwhile, the Navy finally gets permission to do more than just fly over the city. They launch an all-out attack on the giant blob that's headed toward the Statue of Liberty. Apparently, they didn't learn anything after Eve melted the last pilots, but these died just as quickly as Eve's creature forms a protective barrier around her so she can give birth in peace. Realizing that they can't even hurt the thing, the Navy sends a helicopter to pick Aya, Daniel, and Maeda up. Since she's the only one that can get close, they want to put Aya in a helicopter so she can fly up to Eve's monster and blow it up. The chopper will be on autopilot, so all she has to do is ride and shoot. Other soldiers act as human shields to make sure she gets in range, which works, and she succeeds at blowing the thing apart along with Liberty Island. However, Eve emerges from the goo alive and unharmed, so Aya decides to parachute down to finish her off once and for all. They fight, and it turns out that Aya's powers are greater than Eve's, and the woman dies, melting into the goo with a very creepy smile on her face. With Eve dead and Aya back safely on the Navy ship, Daniel and the others think it's all over, until everything starts to shake. It turns out that Eve dying hadn't stopped the ultimate being from being born, and what has to be the ugliest baby ever pulls itself out of the goo and cries, causing a lot of explosions. Everyone thinks it'll probably be a good idea to run, but Aya decides to stay and try to kill the thing since she's the only one who can. Daniel can't really argue, so he reluctantly agrees. Maeda tries to give Aya something, but Daniel's not letting him waste any more of her inventory space with charms, so he drags him off, leaving Aya to fight the ultimate being. As she fights it, it grows, evolving into stronger and stronger forms until it transforms into something that Aya can't even hurt. From the helicopter above, Maeda tells Daniel that if he'd only let him give Aya the special bullets he'd made, this would have all been over. He had made them with Aya's cells, and since her cells countered Eve's, they should destroy Eve's offspring, but it's too late to give them to her now. Daniel disagrees, and in the most he definitely shouldn't survive this moment in a video game, Daniel jumps out of the helicopter, catches on fire, and tosses Aya the bullets while in mid-free fall before he slams into the ocean. Falling from that height and hitting the water like that alone should have killed him. But you know, video games. The bullets cause the ultimate being to start to break down, but they don't kill him, so Aya lures him to the center of the boat, sets the boiler to overload, and jumps off, leaving the creature to die in the explosion. What has to be the longest week of all of their lives is finally over, but Aya still can't understand why she has those powers. Maeda does. It's because a part of Maya was put into Aya too. She was only 7 when her sister died, so she doesn't remember. She was born with a defect in her right eye, so when her sister died, they transplanted her right cornea into Aya. They say that when you experience serious trauma, what you see is branded onto your cornea, so the visions Aya was having of the hospital were the last things her sister ever saw. And the powers that Aya has came from her sister's last gift to her. Without that gift, the city, and likely the world, wouldn't have made it. To celebrate, Aya, Maeda, Daniel, and Ben, for some reason, decide to go to the opera. And while they watch the show, Aya's eyes start to glow, and her body begins to activate something in the people around her, which means if another Eve shows up, Aya won't have to fight it alone. This concludes the story of Parasite Eve. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, subscribe, ding that notification bell, join the Discord, and if you really want to show your support, you can donate to the channel through the link in the description. Until next time, guys. Later.
A long time ago, before Star Wars was changed forever, there was a story about Starkiller, Darth Vader's secret apprentice, and because the story was fantastic, it needed to be covered. So I hope you all enjoyed the tale of Star Wars, The Force Unleashed. Despite what the Emperor told the people of his empire, all of the Jedi weren't wiped out by Order 66. It's Darth Vader's job to hunt down and deal with the ones that managed to survive. One of them has been found on Kashyyyk, the Wookiee homeworld, and Vader heads there to deal with him. The Jedi is not nearly as powerful as Vader had expected, and he's easily overpowered, but before he can kill him, the strong presence that he had sensed takes his lightsaber from him. It turns out that the Jedi had a son. After he crushes the life out of the Jedi, Vader decides to take the boy as his own apprentice. For years he trains him, preparing him for his true mission, to help Vader take down the Emperor. But before the boy that he calls Starkiller is ready, Vader has one final set of tests for him. A Jedi Master named Ram Koda is attacking an important shipyard over the smuggler's moon Nar Shaddaa. Vader wants Starkiller to deal with the Jedi and bring back his lightsaber as proof. But for the plan to work, the Emperor can't find out about Starkiller until the right moment, so Vader wants his apprentice to kill everyone at the facility, whether they're Koda's men or the Imperials, which the boy has no problem with. On his way to his ship, he gets attacked by his droid Proxy, who, because Sith can't have normal toys, turns into Obi-Wan Kenobi and tries to kill him. Since this is a pretty normal occurrence, Starkiller beats the droid, forcing him to turn back to normal, and apologize for failing in his mission to kill his master. I get the whole keeping yourself alert at all times thing, but having your murder bot be programmed to murder you at random has to get annoying after a while. Starkiller completely forgets about the droid when he sees his new pilot. Since he hasn't had much contact with women unless Vader sent him to kill them, Starkiller asks Proxy who the woman is, instead of asking her like a normal person. Her name is Juno Eclipse, and her combat record is pretty impressive for someone so young. Her ears also work very well, and she's not all that happy to have the droid turn into her and recount her life story. It is just a little bit rude. Vader, after having killed Starkiller's last pilot, brought her on board to fly and maintain the Rogue Shadow, but he didn't tell her what types of missions they'll be going on. Starkiller's not all that forthcoming either. All he does is tell her that they need to go to Nar Shaddaa. While on the flight, he gets Proxy to give him all the information he has on General Ram Koda. The Jedi was well respected during the Clone Wars as a military genius, but he didn't really trust the clones. He used his own hand-picked troops, so there were no clones in his ranks at all when Order 66 was carried out. He's been in hiding for years, which means since he's revealed himself, this is clearly a trap. And Starkiller and Juno are flying right into it, which is why he's lost 7 pilots before her. Koda has his trap set and ready, and he's excited to see that he's finally drawn out who he thinks is Darth Vader. He gets ready for the battle while Starkiller cuts a swath through everyone in the area, showing off the true power of the Force as he makes his way to Koda. The Jedi Master is more than a little disappointed to see that after months of attacking Imperial targets, Darth Vader sent a boy to fight him, but he realizes pretty fast that the apprentice isn't someone to be trifled with, so he stops holding back and breaks the section of the station that they're fighting in apart, so they start to fall to the planet below. The fight is nearly even, but a vision of the future showing Coda becoming Starkiller's new master distracts him, letting the Sith burn his eyes out and end the fight by hurling him to the planet below. With his mission accomplished, Starkiller takes the Jedi's lightsaber and heads back to Vader. Because rest is for the dead, Vader immediately sends him after another Jedi, Kazdan Paratus, a master of machinery who Vader fully expects to kill his apprentice. If Starkiller survives the encounter, that will put him one step closer to being strong enough to help Vader finally defeat the Emperor. The Jedi Master is on the junk world of Raxus Prime, a place that is basically a droid graveyard, which makes it the perfect place for scavengers. The Jedi Master built a version of the Jedi Temple on the planet, and he has it surrounded with force-controlled droid guardians, all of various shapes and sizes that Starkiller cuts through on his way to get to his target. The tiny Jedi Master is basically Dr. Octopus with a lightsaber spear and a droid army that he hurls at Starkiller, but the apprentice proves to be more than a match for him, and he puts an end to Kazdan Paratus, completing his mission. Back on his ship, Vader uses proxy to tell Starkiller of his third and final target. This one will be far more dangerous than the others. He's sending him to face off against the former member of the Jedi Council, Shaak Ti, on the overgrown planet of Felucia, where she and her apprentice have been training an army of Felucians to eventually fight against the Empire. When Starkiller arrives, Shaak Ti sends her apprentice Maris Brood off to hide like they practice, because she's not nearly ready to face off against the Dark Lord of the Sith. And since they're among the last of the Jedi, she doesn't want to risk her apprentice. The planet is a landscaper's nightmare full of giant plants, an army of very organized Felucians, and some of the most deadly creatures in Star Wars, the Rancors. Starkiller fights his way through it all and finds Shaak Ti waiting for him at the Sarlacc pit. As strong as she is, Starkiller still defeats her. She acknowledges his power, but she's sad that he's wasting his talents as a servant of the Sith. Despite what she tells him, Starkiller says that he'll never turn on his master. That almost makes Shaak Ti laugh, because the boy doesn't even realize that the Sith always turn on each other. But she says he'll learn that soon enough, as she throws herself into the Sarlacc pit, ending her life. With his mission complete, Vader tells Starkiller to return to his ship so they can finally set up the attack on the Emperor. Palpatine's fleet is already there when Starkiller arrives, so he thinks that the time has come, but Vader hadn't summoned the Emperor. His spies had followed Starkiller, which means he failed his mission, and to save his own life, Vader impales his apprentice and throws him out into space. While he drifts nearly dead, one of Vader's droids goes to retrieve the apprentice. He wakes up after months, strapped to an operating table, with Vader standing over him, and of course he's not that happy about being killed by his master, but Vader had done what he needed to save both of them, and now that the Emperor believes he's dead, he can get his revenge. But the Emperor is watching Vader's every move, so Starkiller has to do something to draw his attention. It has to be big, so Vader wants him to build an army of the Emperor's enemies and form them into a rebel alliance. Once they get the Emperor's attention, Vader and Starkiller can attack. However Starkiller decides to go about starting the rebel alliance is up to him. Vader ends the transmission, letting Proxy turn back into himself, and for the first time in forever, Starkiller is free to make his own decisions. Proxy is just happy that he'll still have the chance to kill his master once he helps him escape the Imperial. Fortunately, Starkiller's ship is docked nearby, and his pilot is also there, locked in a holding cell. She'd been branded a traitor after Starkiller's death, which means the last few months have been pretty bad for her. Vader told Starkiller to cut all his ties to his past life, but he decides to free Juno anyway. It won't exactly be easy. The place is heavily guarded by people who try very hard to kill Starkiller, but things only get worse when Proxy launches all of the escape pods and sets the Imperial on a collision course with the Sun because he is first and foremost a murder bot. But Starkiller still manages to find Juno, and they escape on the Rogue Shadow to begin the new mission of forming a rebel alliance. But Starkiller still wants to do more than just that. He wants to find a teacher who can show him the things that Vader wouldn't. Which means, just like the old days, the two of them are hunting Jedi, and because of General Coda's vision, Starkiller thinks that the man may still be alive, so Juno takes them back to Nar Shaddaa. With a little bit of tracking and planet hopping, Starkiller finds Coda, blind and very drunk in a cantina. The man doesn't recognize him, but he's still not all that willing to help join the fight against the Empire, since he's lost most of his connection to the Force along with his sight. But when a large group of Imperials show up, dead set on killing Coda, he decides to follow Starkiller to his ship. He still thinks it's a dumb idea, but he does have a contact in the Senate that might be able to use Starkiller's lightsaber. Coda's contact wants Starkiller to get something for him from Kashyyyk, the homeworld of the Wookiees, and a world that is completely overrun by the Empire. He won't say what his contact wants, but if Starkiller gets it, he may get his help fighting the Empire. Because he doesn't have much of a choice, Starkiller heads to the Wookiee homeworld and comes across a house that seems very familiar to him for some reason. He senses something and heads inside, only to get a visit from the ghost of his father, who apologizes to him for letting him end up as Vader's slave. The house he had found was the same one that Vader had taken him from as a boy. With the vision ended, Starkiller gets back to doing what he does best, destroying stuff. With how powerful all the children of the Jedi turn out to be, you would think they would have made an effort to promote Jedi having babies. If kids with one Jedi parent turn out as strong as Luke Skywalker and Starkiller, just imagine how strong the children of two Jedi parents would be. After cutting his way through a literal army, Starkiller finds what he was looking for. What he was sent to retrieve was Princess Leia and R2-D2, who were prisoners in all but name. She thinks Starkiller is an assassin sent to kill her, and because Leia has never been scared of anything in her life, she makes sure that if she's about to die, she'll lose her last breath to talk crap about the Emperor. After a little bit of talking, she realizes that Starkiller is working with Coda, and they were sent by her father to get her. But she won't leave the planet while the Wookiees are enslaved, so she wants Starkiller to destroy the Skyhook, which will make it harder for the Empire to get the Wookiees off-world. Because he's trying to get Leia's father on his side, Starkiller goes to destroy the Skyhook, killing the leader of the Wookiee slave operation and freeing the captives in the process. With that done, Starkiller wants to talk to Bail Organa, but Coda hasn't been able to get in touch with him. Bail had gone to Coda to get him to help free Leia, but since the Jedi Master couldn't, the Senator had gone to find another Jedi Master, Shaak Ti on Felucia, but he vanished after he made it to the planet. He's been taken prisoner by Maris, and she's keeping him just in case she needs to use him to bargain with Vader, so that's Starkiller's next destination. Without Shaak Ti's guidance, the planet and the Felucians have been corrupted by the dark side of the Force, making everything far more violent and dangerous. Vader's apprentice still manages to track Bail Organa down, but Maris shows up before they can escape, with a very large bull rancor in tow. Starkiller kills it, then proceeds to show Maris how far out of her league she is. But the woman begs for her life, and in a very un-Sith-like gesture, Starkiller lets her go. Bail doesn't think he should have done that, but they have more important things to worry about than one rogue Dark Jedi. An outright rebellion against the Emperor is too dangerous as far as Bail's concerned. They need weapons, ships, and people willing to risk their lives in the fight. He knows a few people who might be willing, but they need to see that the Empire is actually vulnerable first. Starkiller decides to meditate to find a good target, while Bail talks to his people, and by meditate, he means talk to Darth Vader and find out what would be a good place to attack. Since he was last there, the Empire started building Star Destroyers over Raxus Prime. Destroying that would be a good way to cause a problem for the Emperor. When the transmission ends, Starkiller realizes that he may have caused a problem for himself because Juno saw that he was talking to Vader. Seeing how he's still working for the man that made her a traitor and tried to kill him doesn't make her all that happy, but she doesn't think that Starkiller is fully loyal to Vader anymore, because if he had been, then he would have let her die on the Empirical. Regardless, she lost everything already, and she started to build a new life with the rebels, so she hopes that Starkiller makes the right decision. But for now, all she can do is fly to Raxus Prime. As soon as Starkiller leaves the ship, Proxy follows him, which means the droid will likely try to kill his master again at some point. But for the moment, the apprentice proceeds to tear stuff up. As he makes his way to the top of the area, Proxy finally attacks, shifting between people Starkiller has fought before until he breaks out a brand new transformation. Darth Maul, who is the coolest and most criminally underused Star Wars character, but even that form is no match for Starkiller. With Proxy beaten, Starkiller overloads the railgun, causing it to blow up the Star Destroyer facility above. Problem is, one of the ships comes crashing down towards Starkiller. In one of the greatest feats of raw power in Star Wars history, Starkiller slams the massive ship into the ground and slows it down for long enough for him to jump out of the way. Proxy survives the crash too, but the shockwave burned off some of his processors, erasing the part of his programming that makes him try to kill Starkiller. Without it, he no longer feels like he serves a purpose, but in an even more un-Sith-like gesture, Starkiller helps the broken droid get back to the ship, refusing to leave his friend behind. What Starkiller did on Raxus Prime has the Emperor more than a little ticked off, so Vader feels that the time for their attack is now, but Starkiller doesn't think that the rebels have gotten over their fear enough to attack just yet. They trust him, but if he's ever seen talking to Vader, it will ruin everything, so he tells his master not to contact him anymore. He will call Vader when the preparations are complete. Vader agrees, but he won't wait for that long. He clearly has his doubts about his apprentice's loyalty, and rightfully so, because Starkiller had Juno in the room watching the conversation. Everything he'd said to Vader was a lie. Bail's allies aren't scared at all. They've all gathered on Corellia to officially begin the Rebel Alliance. Mon Mothma, Garm Bel Iblis, Princess Leia using proxy to be there, and even Coda stops being drunk to say that he will agree to join them all in their fight against the Empire. But that fight's over before it begins, as a fleet of Star Destroyers and Darth Vader himself show up. The Emperor wants the rebels brought in alive so he can execute them himself, but before he takes them, Vader outs Starkiller as his apprentice, then immediately tries to kill the boy. From the very beginning, this had always been the plan. Vader had never meant to work with Starkiller to fight the Emperor. From the time he had taken him as a little boy, he had raised him and trained him for the sole purpose of gathering the Emperor's enemies so they could all be dealt with at once. Now with that done, Starkiller can be disposed of. Lucky for him, Proxy distracts Vader for long enough for Starkiller to escape by falling off of the mountain, where Juno picks him up and takes him away in the Rogue Shadow. She can't understand why Vader would let the two of them do so much damage to the Empire on their mission, but money and lives don't matter to the Sith. Only the completion of their mission. But Starkiller refuses to let them get away with it. Using the Force in a way that he hadn't before, he gets a vision of the future that shows him where the Emperor has taken his prisoners. He's brought them all to the Death Star. Starkiller is going to do everything he can to save them, and he wants Juno to be ready to get the rebels out of there when he does. Since it's very likely going to be the last time the two of them see each other, Juno does something that she's wanted to do for a while, and she kisses the apprentice before he heads into the space station. The Force guides him to where the Emperor has the rebels, who he plans on torturing until they tell him where their allies are before he executes them in a very slow and painful public display that will guarantee no one will ever rebel against him again. But they sense Starkiller, so the Emperor sends Vader to deal with the boy once and for all. With all the fighting he's done, Starkiller has done the one thing that the Sith strive for. He surpassed his master. The Emperor being who he is, he tells the boy to finish Vader off and take his place, but Coda attacks the Emperor to keep Starkiller from falling under his spell. The Emperor goads Starkiller into trying to kill him, but Coda stops him because killing with hatred leads to the dark side, and Starkiller would be corrupted just like the Emperor. The real reason he stops him is because the Jedi and the Sith are both fanatic idiots who don't understand that the world is not black and white. There are some shades of gray, and that means there are some people who just need to die. Instead of attempting to finish off the Emperor, which would have failed anyway, Starkiller and the rebels go to leave. The Emperor attacks Coda for interfering, and Starkiller takes the brunt of the attack head on to give his friends the time to escape. He doesn't survive, but his death will do more harm than good. He was supposed to gather the rebels so they could die, and their deaths would be used to discourage any future rebellions, but now he's inspired them to fight, and the Rebel Alliance forms, using Starkiller's family crest as their symbol. The ironic part of this is the Emperor's plan to get rid of his enemies brought together the group that would eventually bring down his entire empire. This concludes the story of Star Wars: The Force Unleashed. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, subscribe, and drop a donation so I can keep bringing you more content. Until next time, guys. Later.
In the land of Ivalice, there's a scholar named Al-Islam who's been studying the history of the land around a time known as the Lion War. The people say the war divided the land in two, as two sides fought to determine who would become the new king, but it all got sorted out by a lone hero named Delita. That's the official story, but Al-Islam isn't sure that's the truth. He believes the true hero of the Lion War was Ramza, the youngest son of the Beowulf noble house, who for reasons unknown was scrubbed from history. Recently, the derived papers that had been sealed away by the church were released, and they say it was Ramza who really put an end to the war, despite the fact that the church has him labeled as a blasphemer and one of the most evil men to ever walk the planet. Al-Islam wants to know the truth, so he dives into the derived papers to learn the true story of the Lion War. A year after the end of the 50-year war, the king died of an illness, and his successor was only 2 years old. He's obviously too young to rule, so his guardian will be the one to take over for him. The queen's older brother Lard got the job, but the parliament figured that the queen would use her brother as a means of ruling herself, so they blocked his appointment to the role of the king's guardian and instead gave the job to the king's cousin Galtana. Both Larg and Galtana are highly decorated generals from the 50-year war, but they had support from two different groups of people. Goltana had the support of the high-ranking nobles, but the disenfranchised nobles and soldiers preferred Larg. Goltana's symbol is the black lion, while Larg's symbol is the white, and the fight between the two of them over the throne will eventually be known as the Lion War. Over at the Orban Monastery, Agrias Oaks has hired a group of mercenaries led by a man named Gafgarian to help protect Princess Ovelia when she leaves the place. One of these mercenaries is Ramza, the main character of this story, but before they can get their journey started, an injured knight comes stumbling in saying that Prince Goltana's men are there. Agrias and her knights head out to deal with them, and even though Ramza stopped being a knight a long time ago, he heads out to help them. Gafgarian joins in too, but he plans on asking for more money for the work. Goltana's men are there to kidnap the princess, so Ramza and the others do the one thing that they can in that situation, and that's put them all down. Unfortunately, while they're fighting at the front, a knight sneaks around the back, knocks the princess unconscious, tosses her on a chocobo, and rides off before Agrias can stop him. The knight who snatched her was Delilah, Ramza's friend from a long time ago who he thought was dead. Since Ramza knows the man who took Ovelia, Agrias wants to know all that she can about him so it will be a little bit easier to track him down. So Ramza tells her a very long story. When Ramza was younger, he and his best friend Delilah were both knight cadets. The world had been at war for 50 years, and after it ended, the soldiers who came home didn't have jobs or money, and because of that, they didn't really have any loyalty to the ruling class. A lot of them became thieves and started plotting a rebellion against the royal family. Ivalice stopped being a safe place to be, which meant every night, even the cadets, were forced to deal with criminals. At the academy, all of the cadets get called into a meeting, and Delilah is pretty sure something big is about to happen since both Prince Larg and Marquis Elmdor of Limberry are coming to town for some reason. The Hokuta Knights are on high alert since everywhere is pretty dangerous, but they don't have enough troops to deal with everything, which is why Delilah is pretty sure that he and Ramza and the rest of the cadets are about to get a mission. Sure enough, their commander comes in saying just that. The Death Corps has it out for the royal family, so the cadets have been ordered to hunt them down and deal with them. Prince Larg's knights are at Egros Castle not too far away from the academy, so they'll be helping too, as well as anyone else that can be spared. The main job of Ramza and the other rookies is to get to Egros Castle and help guard it from the attack that is likely going to happen. But first there are some thieves that have been seen sneaking into town, and the cadets are sent out to get rid of them. Once the thieves have been dealt with, Ramza, Delilah, and the other cadets make their way to Egros. On the way there, they see a man named Algus being attacked by some members of the Death Corps, who are trying to find information on Marquis Elmdor. Since they're supposed to be dealing with the Death Corps anyway, Ramza and his group save Algus by putting them down. Algus is a knight cadet from Limberry, and when he realizes that Ramza's a part of the Beowulf family, he gets excited because Ramza's family is one of the most powerful noble houses around, and they will have the resources to help him save the Marquis. The man's been kidnapped by the Death Corps, and Algus thinks they're gonna kill him. Delilah highly doubts that the Death Corps kidnapped such a high-ranking noble just to kill him. Even if they were, there isn't a whole lot that Ramza can do about it anyway. So instead of running off blindly, they head to Egros Castle to get their new orders. Ramza's brother Dicedarg is in charge of Egros, and he's already heard about the kidnapping. He has Ramza's other brother Zalbag leading a search party to hunt the man down, and he's pretty sure that if they haven't already killed Elmdor, the Death Corps will be sending out some ransom demands soon. Algus wants Dicedarg to give him some soldiers so he can get revenge on the Death Corps for killing his friends, but there's no way anyone would give a low-ranking soldier an army to lead, so instead Dicedarg assigns them all to guard Egros. He doesn't think the fighting will reach the castle, but you never know. Algus isn't happy with the assignment, but there's nothing he can do about it. In the old days, his family had as much pull as the Beowulfs, but his grandpa got captured during the 50-year war and sold his friends out to save himself. Nobody looks highly on people who do that, so nobody batted an eye when a rookie soldier stabbed him in the back. One of his grandpa's friends escaped captivity and told everyone about it, which caused his family to lose all of their political clout. Hanging around the castle is boring, but it does give Ramza's sister Alma a chance to see him. Tata, Delilah's sister, is there too, so she finally gets to catch up with her brother. She and Alma are in school together, but even though she tries to hide it from Delilah, since she's not nobly born, they don't exactly treat her well. Zalbag is still around the castle too, but before he heads off to continue his duties, he lets Ramza and the others know that the Death Corps have demanded a ransom for Elmdor. The whole thing doesn't make sense to him because the Death Corps seems to have bigger goals than just kidnapping nobles for money. He sent a spy out to watch some members of their group, but he hasn't come back yet. Zalbag is pretty sure he's in trouble, but the higher-up nobles don't think there's any reason to search for him. He'd been sent to the trade city of Dorda to the east, and while he wants to send some people out after him, he can't officially go against orders. But since it's not like Ramza and the cadets are doing anything productive around the castle, he indirectly sends them to Dorda to look for his missing man. When they reach the city, they see Wiegraf, the leader of the Death Corps, brutally interrogating one of his own men. He apparently had no idea that one of his underlings, a man named Gustav, had kidnapped the Marquis, and he wants to know where he took him. When the guy realizes that Weegrove is going to kill him, he spills the beans. Weegrove was going to kill the man anyway for what he did, but when Ramza and the others spot him, he decides to leave before he gets captured. There are a few more members of the Death Corps there that Ramza's crew puts down, but they do capture the same guy that Weegrove had questioned. Algus interrogates him in a much more brutal way than Weegrove had, since he's not all that fond of commoners. The Death Corps members do have a legitimate grievance though. They fought in the 50-year war, but once it was over, they were left to fend for themselves, all because they weren't nobly born. Delilah can sympathize since he's not a noble either, but none of them can really agree with kidnapping people regardless of the situation. If the Death Corps is okay with that, then they kind of lose the moral argument. That's why Weegrove never agreed to snatch Elmdor. Gustav is one of Weegrove's top-ranking officers, and he had a different idea about how things should be run, and Weegrove's gone to deal with him. He's hiding in the desert to the north of Dorter, and he probably has the Marquis with him, so Ramza and the others head off to save him. They fight their way inside of the hideout right as Weegrove kills Gustav for what he did. Weegrove is perfectly fine with them taking the Marquis back to Egros if they let him leave without a fight. Algus doesn't want to, but Ramza and Delilah are pretty sure that even if they can beat Weegrove, he will likely make sure the Marquis dies in the fight, so they let him go and take Elmdor back to Egros Castle, where they will very likely get in trouble for disobeying orders, despite the fact that their mission was a success. Ramza's brother was not happy about the fact that Ramza and Delilah went after Elmdor against his orders. Having his own family members disobey orders is not something that helps with keeping the regular soldiers respecting the chain of command. Dystark's not all that willing to forgive Ramza's insubordination either, but since his actions helped save Elmdor, Prince Larg is willing to let it go. The mission of dealing with the Death Corps is nearly finished, and since Ramza seems dead set on putting himself in the forefront of it one way or another, Dystark decides to let him, Delilah, and Algus join one of the more important tasks. They found a few places where Death Corps members are hiding, and Dystark is willing to let Ramza's group choose which one of them to attack. They head off to do just that while Dystark and Larg talk about why he was really upset about Ramza's interference. Gustav was one of Larg's men, so Dystark thought he'd be upset over Ramza messing up one of his plans, but it turned out better than what Larg had originally wanted. He had been trying to get Elmdor's people to work with him, and having Dystark's brother rescue the man should work wonders for having him get brought over to his side. Dystark is pretty sure the king will be dead soon, so they need to get their plans organized fast so they can capitalize on what will happen when the king croaks. Ramza's group just so happens to attack the base where Maluda, Weegrove's sister, is held up. She tries to explain that the Death Corps just wants the nobles to stop treating them like animals, but Algus makes it pretty clear that he sees the poor as nothing more than trash, and they don't deserve equal treatment. The guy is a total prick, but neither Ramza nor Delilah agree with his way of thinking, and they let Maluda go. While they were out, the Death Corps launches an attack on Egros. They injure Dystark pretty badly and kidnap Delilah's sister. They tried to snatch Alma too, but Zalbag managed to save her before she could get taken. When Delilah hears about what happened to his sister, he does not take it well, but Dystark makes it clear that when Zalbag finds the place where the Death Corps is held up, they won't attack it until they get Tata back. Algus is pretty sure that Dystark is lying since no one with any sense would waste troops trying to save a commoner. That rightfully makes Delilah punch him in the face. Algus doesn't really care if what he said made a commoner mad, since no matter how Delilah feels about it, he'll never be the same as Ramza. The two can play at being friends all they want, but the difference in class makes that impossible. Ramza doesn't agree, and he tells Algus to leave before he decides to put hands on the man too. He does leave, but not before he lets Ramza know that his brothers have found the Death Corps' base. It's at a place called Fort Zeekton, and they're getting ready to attack it. Going at the place from the front is a good way to die, so he suggests that Ramza attacks it from the rear if he wants to save the little commoner girl. Ramza tells Delilah where Tata likely is, and the two of them grab their squad and head off to rescue her. On the way there, they run into Maluda and some of her people while they're trying to escape. Delilah wants her to tell him where Weegrove took his sister just in case he didn't take her to the fort, and she assumes that Tata was a part of the Bayo family. When she finds out that she's not, it doesn't change the fact that she was hanging around with the nobles who have oppressed them, so she refuses to tell Delilah where her brother went, and she refuses to stop fighting until they kill her. At one of the Death Corps' safe houses nearby, Weegrove confronts the guy who kidnapped Tata because he wants to know why he's abducting people. Golagros claims that he took her as a hostage so he could escape Egros, but if that were true, Weegrove wants to know why he hasn't let the girl go yet. It's starting to seem like Gustav 2.0, which means Weegrove is about to kill another one of his men who have gone rogue, but Golagros points out that they've lost most of their men, and they're surrounded by Hokudan knights. Keeping the Beowulf girl may be their only way to escape. Escaping doesn't matter to Weegrif since he knows that they'll be caught and executed eventually. They just have to do as much damage as they can and drag as many of their enemies along with them to the grave. That way their children can have a better life. And he's pretty sure that there are survivors at Fort Zeekton that can help them get back on the offensive. A messenger comes in letting him know that his sister has gotten killed, and the people who did it will be there soon. So he tells Golagros and the others to leave Tata there and head to Fort Zeekton. That way they can get their defenses ready while he delays the invaders. Golagros leaves, but he takes Tata with him as insurance. Weegrif is surprised that some cadets managed to kill his sister, but regardless he has to kill them to avenge her. He does think it's kind of funny that Golagros kidnapped the wrong girl, but he makes it clear that if they want the girl back they'll have to beat him. He's surprised that he can't overpower a group of cadets, but he refuses to die there. Before he leaves, he lets Ramza know that Dystarg had Gustav kidnap the Marquis, and it's likely Zalbag knew about it. Ramza doesn't believe it, but both Larg and Goltana are fighting to get support for their claim to the throne, so the easiest way to get it is to remove the people in power and replace them with people you can control. Dystarg tricked Gustav into kidnapping the Marquis, and they were probably going to kill him if Ramza hadn't interfered. Ramza still doesn't believe him, but Weegrif is pretty sure he'll see the truth about his brothers eventually. Delilah doesn't care about any of that political stuff, he just wants his sister back, but unfortunately Golagros didn't listen to Weegrif and he took Tata with him, which means they have to go to Fort Zeekton. When they get there, Zalbag and his troops are already there with Algus. Golagros has Tata and is trying to use her to make Zalbag and the others leave him alone. That and the fact that the fort is full of enough explosive powder to turn them and the entire building to ash. Proving that what Algus said about Ramza's brothers was true, Zalbag tells Algus to shoot Tata so he can kill Golagros. Algus is completely okay with shooting the woman right in front of her brother. Golagros manages to crawl into the fort to keep from getting shot again, and after news comes that Weegrif and about 50 soldiers have been spotted nearby, Zalbag leaves Algus to finish taking care of the fort as well as dealing with Ramza and Delilah. Delilah and Ramza do the world a favor and kill Algus, but while Delilah is checking on Tata to see if she's still alive, Golagros lights the powder that's in the fort and causes it to explode. Ramza gets separated from Delilah and his sister by the explosions, and since there's nothing he can do, he runs away. After hearing the story, Agrias is ready to go after Delilah since she wouldn't be able to face the royal family if she failed to protect the princess. And even though Gafgarian refuses to help hunt for Ovelia since he hasn't been paid to do that, Ramza agrees to go so he can find out how Delilah survived the explosion and why he kidnapped the princess in the first place. The people who ordered Ovelia's kidnapping were expecting people to come after her, so they paid some less than reputable folks to make sure that Ramza and the others didn't chase them for long. When the mercenaries see that Gafgarian is a part of the group, they realize that they should have asked for way more money since he's apparently famous for being dangerous. Once they've all been dealt with, Agrias figures that the only place the kidnappers could be taking Ovelia is to Bethla Garrison, so that's where the group starts to head. They don't end up having to go that far because they find Delilah and Ovelia at a waterfall surrounded by Hokutan knights. They claim that they'll let Delilah live if he turns the princess over to them, but he's pretty sure that they'll kill both him and Ovelia if he does that, so he refuses. They claim that he's lying, but once Ovelia sees Agrias, they decide to stop wasting time with the lies and reveal that Gafgarian has been working with them all along. Their job was to kidnap the princess and kill everyone who saw them do it. They want her out of the way because she's the rightful heir to the throne and a hindrance to Larg getting the seat. Delilah taking her before they could do their job was an unexpected problem since they were planning on blaming her death on Goltana. Delilah's pretty sure that Ramza's brother Dystarg had something to do with making this plan since he's still working with Larg. Gafgarian assumed that Ramza would go along with him, but he clearly guessed wrong because Ramza teams up with Delilah to deal with Gafgarian and his knights, which forces the mercenary to retreat since dying's not at the top of his priority list. When the battle's done, Delilah tries to convince Ramza and Agrias to leave the princess with him since she'll be safer. Now that they've made an enemy of the Hokutan, they will be hunting Ramza's group non-stop, and it's only a matter of time before they catch them and kill them all. Since it was Larg's plan, the royal family is clearly not on Ramza's side, and Goltana will probably execute Ramza's group just to avoid making it look like he really did go after the princess. So they don't have many safe places to go. Delilah claims that he does, but he can't tell Ramza how or what he's working on. He's not looking to fight Ramza right now though, so he agrees to let him keep the princess for now. Agrias is grateful for Ramza's help since he's basically just made himself the enemy of one of the most powerful men in Ivalice. And while what Delilah said about not having any allies is mostly true, Agrias thinks that they can ask Cardinal Draclaw for help. The Globados Church has a lot of authority, even enough to make Prince Larg not want to make an enemy out of them, so heading to Lionel Castle and talking to the Cardinal may be their best chance to avoid death.
On the way there, they pass through a city where a man named Mustadio is being chased by some shady-looking people. They want something that he has, and their leader, a man named Rudvik, has kidnapped Mustadio's father as a means of guaranteeing that he hands it over. He's pretty sure that the man will kill both of them once he gets what he wants, so he's not exactly willing to hand it over. Lucky for him, Ramza and his friends see him and decide to help him out by murdering Rudvik's men. Mustadio thanks Agrius and Ramza for their help and lets them know that the men they killed were from the Bart Company. They're known around Ivalice as importers of goods, but they're really a very big crime syndicate that dabbles in everything from smuggling to slave trading. They're all around bad people, so he doesn't think Ramza should lose any sleep over the ones he killed. Mustadio is a mechanic, one of the people who study the lost civilization that supposedly exists under Gaug the Machine City. Back in the days of Saint Ajora, technology was more advanced than in the present day. There were flying airships and human robots that walked around the town performing jobs that regular people didn't want to do. As time passed, the technology was lost, and most people stopped believing that it existed at all, except for the people who actually explored Gaug and have seen the broken machines and airships that are buried under the city. The mechanics are working to restore that old technology. That's where Mustadio got his gun from. It shoots out regular gunpowder-fueled bullets, but from what he's heard, there are some that can actually be loaded with magic. That's not why the Bart Company are after him, but he doesn't feel comfortable telling Ramza the particulars of what he found just yet. He did hear that Ramza was going to see the Cardinal and he wants to tag along. Draculaw was a hero in the 50-Year War, and a lot of people respect him. That means he could probably make the Bart Company release Mustadio's dad, but he'd never meet with some random mechanic. If Ramza lets him tag along, he may get to ask the man for help. Agrius doesn't want to bring him since he won't say why he's being hunted, but Ovelia decides to let him tag along anyway. So with their new member in tow, they get back on the road to Lionel Castle. While Ramza and the others are making their way to the Cardinal, over at Egros Castle, Dicedarg is giving Gafgarian the go-ahead to do whatever it takes to get Ovelia, and kill everyone else who's blocking that goal, including his own brother. Gafgarian isn't all that fond of fighting the church if they decide to defend the princess, but Dicedarg has a plan if it comes to that. It turns out that Dicedarg had hired some other people to kidnap the princess at Orban Monastery, but Delilah had killed them and took her himself. Not even Dicedarg knows who he's working for, but it's clear that they're trying to stop his plans. That's not important at the moment. All that matters is getting Ovelia, so he sends Gafgarian off to get back on the hunt. When Ramza and the others make it to the Cardinal and tell him their story, he immediately agrees to help expose Prince Larg's plan and keep the princess safe, and he's willing to let Agrius and Ovelia stay in the castle until everything's been taken care of. He's even willing to send troops to Gaug to deal with the Bart Company for Mustadio, but he does want to know why they're after him and his father. Mustadio says that he can't tell him, but the Cardinal is pretty sure that he already knows. Mustadio and his father must have found one of the Holy Stones while they were sifting through the wreckage of Gaug. Draculaw knows this because he has one of the stones too. The stones are a part of an old religious tale called the Zodiac Brave story that may or may not be true. A long time ago, 12 warriors fought against the Lucavi, who were very powerful demons that ruled the world. The 12 managed to seal the Lucavi away in another dimension, freeing the world from their control. Each warrior carried a crystal with a zodiac sign carved into it, and that made people start calling them the Zodiac Braves. Their leader was a man named Saint Ajora, and according to the legend, every time the world is in danger, the Braves and Ajora show up and save it. The Zodiac crystals are called the Holy Stones by the church, and the one that the Cardinal has is one of the stones that were used by the actual Braves of the stories. The stones are supposed to hold power greater than the Lucavi wielded, which is why anyone who knows about them would do anything to get their hands on one. Since the Cardinal already knew the truth, Mustadio admits that he did find one under Gaug, and every time it gets around the broken machines, they start to make noise like they're coming alive. Rudvik wants the stone so he can use it to make weapons, and since the last thing the group of criminals needs are stronger weapons, Mustadio's father told him to never give them the stone. So they kidnapped him to try and force Mustadio to hand it over anyway. Draculaw promises that his men will save Mustadio's father, and since the princess is safe, Ramza decides to go to Gaug with him to help Mustadio save his dad, and to keep a crazy man from getting his hands on a rock that has the power of a god. When Mustadio and Ramza get to Gaug, it is pretty clear that something is wrong. There are no members of the Bart Company anywhere, but it doesn't look like there's been a fight, which it would have been if the Cardinal soldiers had shown up like they were supposed to. Mustadio decides to look around for his father and tells Ramza where to meet up with him a little bit later. It takes a while, but Mustadio finally shows up, but he doesn't show up to the meeting spot alone. Rudvik and some of his men captured him and brought him and his father there to force him to tell them where the stone is. Since he doesn't really have a choice now, he tells them and Ramza gets it and hands it over. Now that he has the stone and he's pretty confident that Ramza and Mustadio are about to die, Rudvik lets slip that he was after the stone for Cardinal Draclaw before he leaves. After taking down his men and saving Mustadio's father, the mechanic reveals that the stone he gave to Rudvik was a fake, one that he made just in case he had to turn it over, and he still has the real one in his pocket. That's great for him, but since the Cardinal wasn't exactly being honest with them, Ramza is positive that Agrius and Ovelia are not safe with him. If he's hunting for the Zodiac Stones, him and the church may very well be trying to use the stones in the legend of the Zodiac Braves to make the church into the new ruling body of Ivalice, since the Lion War has made everything unstable, which means that Ovelia would be in just as much danger in the hands of the church as she would be if Goltana or Larg got her. Since they helped him out, Mustadio agrees to help Ramza save Ovelia and Agrius, but he's pretty sure they won't be able to take the same route back to Lionel Castle that they did before, since the Cardinal's men will likely be watching for Ramza, so they hop on a ship so they can try and sneak around the back of the castle. That turns out to be a good idea, because none of the Lionel soldiers are in the trade city that they passed through, but Delilah just so happens to be there, and he warns Ramza that worrying about the princess and holy stones might not be all that good for his health. Things are about to get very dangerous, and the Lion War is the least important part of it. He knows a lot more than he's telling Ramza, obviously, but he leaves without telling him anything of substance. While Ramza is making his way back to Lionel Castle, Rudvik and Gafgarian have both made it to see the Cardinal. He's planning on handing the princess over to Dicedark since he had already agreed to do just that, once he's let Gafgarian use her as bait to lead both Ramza and Mustadio into a trap so Gafgarian can kill them and take the stone. He heads off to set up the trap, but as for Rudvik, since he got tricked into turning over a fake stone, the Cardinal kills him. While racing back to the castle, Ramza runs right into Agrius, who's being chased by some knights from Lionel Castle. She had escaped after she heard that the Cardinal was working with Prince Larg, but the princess got captured again, and they're taking her to the Golgorand execution site at that very moment. So Agrius and Ramza finish off her attackers and rush over to the site to stop the princess from getting beheaded. Turns out the princess was never taken to the site at all, and this was the trap that Gafgarian had set up for Ramza. It doesn't work, and instead of dying, Gafgarian runs away again, so Ramza heads back to Lionel Castle. It turns out that Delilah was working with the Cardinal, which is something Ovelia finds out when he's the one who brings her food to her prison. But she still doesn't know what him and his group want with her since they aren't taking her to Larg at all. Whatever they're planning, she'll have to go along with it if she doesn't want to die. Delilah was actually going to explain part of the plan to her, but the Cardinal and one of the church's high-ranking knights named Vormov comes in and reveals that Ovelia isn't actually the original princess at all. The real princess died a long time ago, and some politicians who hadn't liked the original royals killed a few princes in a way that looked like natural causes, then had Ovelia get adopted as the new princess since they didn't think the king was healthy enough to have another son, something that they turned out to be very wrong about. Granted, not everyone is sure that Ornas is actually the old king's biological son. Larg may have pulled some strings to make the king think he'd had a baby with Larg's sister just so he could be in a position to take power. Ovelia doesn't believe him, but whether she was the real princess or not is irrelevant when it comes to the Cardinal and Vormov's plan. People think she's a legitimate heir to the throne, and they want to put her there under the control of the church, making them the new rulers of Ivalice instead of either Larg or Goltana. When Ramza and Agrius make it to the castle, Gafgarian attacks them again, and this time Ramza finally kills the man. With him out of the way, they head inside to face the Cardinal. The princess has already been sent to Zeltinia, and the Cardinal has no intention of letting Ramza go after her while he holds the Holy Stone, because he knows what they can really do, and he proves it by transforming himself into a Lucavi. Letting the demon use his body doesn't give it access to its full power, so Ramza and his group are able to kill the thing and add another Holy Stone to their collection. Over at Zeltinia, since Delilah was the one who saved Ovelia from Larg, he gets to meet with Goltana and his most important allies. Delilah claims to be one of Baron Grimm's Black Sheep Knights, but the Baron died a month ago in a battle that wiped out his entire Black Sheep squad. Delilah is obviously lying, but since none of Goltana's allies knew every member of the squad, they don't have any way to confirm Delilah's identity, and since he did bring the princess, they assume he's telling the truth. Delilah also brought a prisoner from the group who had kidnapped the princess for Larg. The plan was to frame Goltana for the kidnapping to keep him from taking over Lassalia, and they set the plan up with one of Goltana's top men who wanted to join Larg. After making Delilah promise to not let him get executed, the prisoner snitches on one of the men in that very room, and since treason is punishable by death, Delilah cuts the man down. After what he's seen, Delilah thinks Goltana should take his Nantan Knights to Lassalia right away before they blame him for what happened, which would turn more people against him. And instead of playing things slowly, they need to get rid of Ornas and the Queen and put Ovelia on the throne right away. Goltana takes his advice and heads to Lassalia with his army.
They lock the queen away in Bethla garrison and pronounce Ovelia the new ruler of Evilis. However, Larg claims that Oranos is the rightful heir and crowns him king. But since he's so young, Larg acts as the true leader until Oranos is old enough to do the job himself. So acting on Oranos' behalf, Larg sends the Hokutan to Bethla garrison to rescue the queen, and Gotana sends a large contingent of Nantan knights to keep them out, which is where the Lion War officially begins. The Lion War has caused a lot of death on both sides, and even more people are injured. Food storages are low, and the drought has caused a lot of refugees to come to Lasalia, which is causing Larg a lot of problems. That's good for Gotana, but Orlando is pretty sure that it's only a matter of time before the same happens to them. He thinks it's about time that they start talking peace, but Gotana has no plans on doing that no matter how bad things get for the common people. Orlando is not happy about that, but there's nothing he can do about that since he's not in charge. While that's going on, Rams is heading for Lasalia to let his brother Zalbag know that someone behind the scenes is manipulating everyone, and they're probably doing it for a very unpleasant reason. On the way to see his brother, Ramza runs into a man named Olan who accidentally wandered into a group of thieves' hideout, and he's in the process of getting murdered, so Ramza does his usual hero thing and saves him. When the fighting's done and Ramza introduces himself, Olan is surprised to hear that he's a Beowulf since most of that family are kinda dicks, but he's glad that he ran into the one that's not. He's not heading to Lasalia though, so he and Ramza go their separate ways, although Olan is pretty sure that they'll meet again. In Lasalia, Zalbag's not all that interested in Ramza's conspiracy theories, but he is surprised that Ramza thinks Dystar kidnapped the princess. The two of them start arguing, but they're interrupted when one of Zalbag's knights comes in claiming that Thunder God Sid and his troops have broken through the Dagula Pass. That's a pretty big deal since they didn't know his forces were anywhere near the pass, so Zalbag leaves Ramza to go and deal with this new problem, and Ramza decides to go ahead and leave the castle. He was planning on leaving without telling Alma, but she sees him trying to sneak out of the back, so he has to talk to his sister. She's surprised to hear that Delilah is alive and helped kidnap the princess. Ramza had thought he was working for Gotana, but he thinks he's involved with a third party instead. Unlike Zalbag, Alma believes Ramza about Dystar, and since Ramza is fighting against him, she wants to go with him. His life isn't exactly easy, so he doesn't want to bring her along, but their discussion is cut short when Zalmo, a heretic hunter from the church, shows up. Ramza has been branded a heretic and is required to stand trial for killing the cardinal and stealing the holy stones. Since their version of a trial is similar to the way they tried to get witches to confess in Salem, whether Ramza is found guilty or innocent, he'll still get executed, so Alma wants him to run. That makes Zalmo attack, but Ramza beats him, so he runs away. Ramza has no idea how the man found out about the holy stone, but he's pretty sure it has something to do with whoever Delilah is working for. Alma has actually seen one of the holy stones herself, and she'll tell Ramza where it is if he agrees to take her with him. Since she's probably been labeled a heretic too since she helped fight off Zalmo, and he doesn't exactly trust Dystar to keep her safe, Ramza agrees to bring her. Since he agrees to bring her, she lets him know that she saw one of the stones at the Orban monastery, so it's time to head back there to retrieve it. Alma wasn't the only person who had seen the stone at the monastery, because when she and Ramza get there, the place has already been attacked. A lot of the people are dead, and Simon, the old man who leads the monastery, is badly injured. He's still alive though, and he lets Ramza know that they've had the holy stone at the monastery since Princess Ovelia was brought there, as a sign of proof that she was a part of the royal family. The whole situation is so dangerous that he doesn't think Ramza should get involved, but he's already in way too deep to just run off and hide. The high priest and his people are trying to regain power by weakening both Larg and Gotana's military, as well as how the general public view the royal family. Once the people are tired of the fighting and desperate for a savior, the church will send out their Zodiac Braves to play the role of hero and get the people to follow the church. Ramza's gonna go and try to stop them from getting the Virgo stone, and he wants Alma to take care of Simon while he's gone. He leaves the two Zodiac stones with her just in case he doesn't make it out, before he heads deeper into the monastery. The church has sent a lot of people led by a man named Islud and another man that Ramza ran into a long time ago, Wegruf. Islud thinks that Ramza should join them like Delilah did since he's working against his brothers too, but he doesn't seem to know about the demonic power of the so-called holy stones, or that the cardinal turned into a monster. Once it's been made clear that Ramza won't join him, and that Islud isn't strong enough to beat Ramza in a fight, he retreats and takes Alma with him as a hostage while leaving Wegruf to deal with Ramza. The man wanted the chance to get revenge on Ramza for killing his sister anyway, so he's more than happy to do it. Unfortunately for him, Ramza is stronger than he is, and he wounds him so badly that he can't escape with Islud. While he's dying from his injuries, the Zodiac stone that he's holding starts to talk to him, and it offers him immortality if he gives it his body. Since he really didn't want to die, he agrees, and his body is merged with the demon Vilius. Ramza wants to fight him, but since Wiegraf only just got his new powers, he teleports away to learn more about what his new form can do before he finally kills Ramza. Simon comes crawling out of the building and he hands Ramza a book written by Germanic, one of Saint Ajora's disciples. The book had been lost, but Simon found it, and it explains the true history of the Zodiac Braves and proves that the church's religion is a crock of crap. He thinks Ramza can use the book to discredit the church and make them give his sister back, but he won't get to see it because he dies from his injuries. With the book in hand, Ramza heads off to try and track down Islud so he can hopefully save his sister. The church clearly knew that Ramza had gotten the Germanic scriptures, because as soon as he leaves the Orban monastery, a weird-looking wizard comes to him telling him to bring the book to the Rylvain's castle if he ever wants to see his sister alive again. Since he doesn't have much of a choice, he starts heading to the meeting site. The path to the castle isn't exactly clear since Ramza has a pretty big price on his head, and some soldiers have gotten tired of fighting in the Lion War, and they think that the reward for killing a heretic would make things easier for them. The problem is, killing Ramza isn't easy and the people who try end up dead. Just like he had promised, Olan runs into Ramza again, and it turns out that he's a part of Goltana's Nantan Knights. He's been sent out to hunt deserters, so he has no interest in fighting Ramza. Ramza's brother's men are a different story, however, and since they aren't that far away, Olan thinks that it's in Ramza's best interest to get away from there. Ramza agrees, but before he leaves, he tells Olan to let him know if he comes across the Nantan Knight Orlandu, since he was Ramza's dad's old friend, and may be more interested in making peace than the rest of the knights. As luck would have it, Orlandu is Olan's father-in-law, so he'll definitely see the man again, and if he finds out that the church is doing some heinous stuff, he'll be more than willing to turn his sword toward them. And since he's one of the deadliest warriors in Ivalice, that would mean a lot. They think that the high priest is plotting something, but they don't have any proof. If it wasn't for the fact that Ramza needs the Germanic scriptures to save his sister, he would have told Olan about it, but since saving his sister is more important than stopping the war, he says his goodbyes to Olan and heads on. The strange wizard who had brought Ramza the message is named Malik, and he had never planned on letting Ramza reach the castle. He set up an ambush so he could kill the man and take the scriptures for his own master. His sister Rafa doesn't want to be used as a tool of murder anymore, and she wants her brother to escape with her. He feels more loyalty to their master since he saved them after their parents were killed during the 50-year war. But Rafa is pretty sure that Grand Duke Barrington took advantage of the war and used it as an excuse to burn their village and turn them into willing slaves, all because of their special magic. Malik doesn't believe her about that, so he's not going to turn on the man. With or without her brother, Rafa is done, and to prove it, she warns Ramza about the ambush and helps him force her brother to retreat. With her brother gone, Rafa gives Ramza a heads up about what he'll face when he goes after his sister, and who the man is that her brother is working for. Barrington wants to be king, and he's known for making weapons and training wizards, so he'll be very well defended. Malik sends Ramza a message by talking through a frog, which is a pretty cool power, and tells him to get to Rylvain's castle faster than gonna kill his sister, and if Rafa doesn't come with them, they'll still kill her. Since neither of them have a choice, they race off to the castle. When they get there, Barrington is meeting with Wiegraf and Vormov in an attempt to get them to work with him to overthrow both Larg and Goltana. The man is very well informed when it comes to the Zodiac Stones and the power that they hold. He also knows why Vormov is hunting Ramza. Vormov tries to play ignorant, but it turns out that Barrington learned the truth from Vormov's son Islud after he took the 2 stones from him that Islud took from Ramza's sister. Vormov isn't happy about that, but he's still not willing to work with Barrington. The man threatens to expose the church's corruption if they don't, and he'll use the Germanic scriptures to do it. Vormov doesn't take too kindly to threats, so he sends Wiegraf out to deal with Ramza, and he uses the Zodiac Stone's power to deal with everyone in the room. Barrington sees what's about to happen and he runs away while his men get slaughtered. Ramza and Rafa force Malik to retreat again, and this time Rafa chases after her brother to try and make him run away with her while Ramza heads into the castle to save Alma. The castle is in total chaos. Vormov and Wiegraf are wreaking so much havoc that one of the knights feels bad about leaving Alma locked in a cell with no means of escape, so he lets her out before he dies, giving her at least a small chance to live. While she's looking for a way out, Ramza comes face to face with Wiegraf, who seems to have a completely different personality after his resurrection. He doesn't even care about his sister's death anymore, and instead just wants to kill people and cause chaos. That doesn't change the fact that Ramza will have to go through him to save his sister, so the two fight and Ramza forces him to teleport away. He changes his mind mid-retreat and decides to turn into Velius to deal with Ramza once and for all. Despite having the power of a Lucavi, Wiegraf dies, letting Ramza collect another Zodiac Stone before he continues his hunt through the castle. Alma makes it to the room where Vormov had first started his attack, and she sees that he didn't even spare his son. Islud finally realizes that Ramza was right about the stones, just a little bit too late. But he gives Alma the stone that he has and tells her to make her brother warn everyone that if they don't stop fighting and work together against the new Zodiac Braves, everyone's gonna die. Alma takes the stone and heads off to do just that, but unfortunately for her, Vormov finds her first. He senses Wiegraf's death, which makes him realize just how dangerous Ramza really is. He gets ready to kill Alma, but his Virgo stone resonates with her, marking her as the person that he had been hunting for. So instead of killing her, he knocks her out and takes her with him, not noticing that Islud's stone fell out of her pocket when he grabbed her. Barrington had run to the roof of the castle to avoid getting murdered by Vormov, but Rafa followed him so she could finally get revenge on him for killing her parents. Unfortunately for her, she brought a knife to a gunfight, so the odds of her winning are pretty much zero. Barrington knows this, and like a typical movie villain, he gloats about how nothing will happen to him despite all of the things he's done to her and her family. Malik overhears him admitting to everything that Rafa had accused him of, so when he goes to shoot her, Malik pushes her out of the way and takes the hit himself. Ramza hears the commotion and comes to see what happened, but he can't exactly help while Barrington has a gun pointed at Rafa. Malik has the stones that they took from Alma in his pocket, so Barrington tells Rafa to bring them to him. Before she can comply, Marquis Elmdor and two very strong women show up and toss Barrington off the roof of the castle, before demanding that Rafa turn the stones over to them. Elmdor had supposedly died in a battle not so long ago, so Ramza is pretty sure that the man is as human as Wiegraf was in the end, which means giving him more Zodiac stones is not a good idea, so he attacks the Marquis instead, despite the fact that the man claims he'll make Vormov give Alma back if Ramza complies. After fighting with Ramza, the Marquis realizes why two of the Lucavi have lost to the man, and he decides to retreat so he can prepare to fight him on better terms at his own castle in Limberry. With the battle done and his sister still missing, Ramza gets ready to make his next move, but he stops when the Zodiac stone Rafa has starts talking to her, in much the same way that Wiegraf's had. It senses how sad she is over her brother's death, and it activates bringing him back to life, which proves that the power in the stones isn't inherently bad. It all depends on the desires of the person using them. While leaving the castle, Ramza finds the stone that Alma dropped, and with Rafa and Malik both deciding to join him on his mission, he makes his way to Limberry Castle where he hopes to finally rescue his sister. After searching through all of the corpses in the castle and making sure that his sister wasn't one of them, Ramza learns from Malik that there were only 3 shrine knights from the church in the castle. Ramza killed Wiegraf, and Islud was dead, which means the 3rd knight probably took his sister. If he did, then he may have taken her to the holy city of Muron, since the shrine knights are following the high priest's orders. Even though the shrine knights are working for the priest, Ramza doubts he knows the true nature of the holy stones. Wiegraf hadn't known until Velia spoke to him, and Islud's body looked like he had been murdered by a Lucavi, so it's possible that only a handful of the church's followers understand what the stones are. That means there's a 4th group in the Lion War that's planning on using the Zodiac Brave story to dominate everyone, including the church, and Vormov may be the one running the show. With things getting more and more chaotic in the world, Ramza decides to head to Zeltinia to talk to Delilah. He wants to find out if the man knows what Vormov is up to. On the way to Zeltinia, Ramza and his ever-growing army of allies are attacked by a woman who wants to get revenge on him because she thinks he killed her brother Islud, and she's not exactly willing to buy the story that her brother got killed when Vormov turned into a Lucavi, especially since Vormov is her dad, which is something that Ramza hadn't expected. Ramza forces the woman to run away, but not before she vows to add her name to the never-ending list of people who want to kill him for one reason or another. When the battle's done, Ramza meets up with Delilah in a church, which is an odd place for a heretic to go, but the church is trying to kill him anyway, so it doesn't matter all that much. That doesn't mean he plans on making it easy for them, so instead of wasting time with small talk, he asks Delilah why the high priest sent him to work for Goltana, and the man actually answers the question. He was sent there to kill both Orlandu and Goltana. The church is trying to make the civilians who hate the government get angry enough to revolt, which will cause both Larg and Goltana to have to use their armies to stop the revolution. But between the deserters and the high body count of the war, they won't have enough soldiers to stop the civil unrest. Once they realize they only have one option left, they'll try to end the war by throwing all of their forces against each other in a final battle, since neither side is willing to negotiate. The reason Delilah was perfectly fine with telling Ramza all of that is because the plan is pretty much complete, and the two armies are getting ready to head to Bethla Garrison for the final battle at that very moment. A battle where both Larg and Goltana will be assassinated, along with the leaders of each major knight faction, including Ramza's brothers. Without the army's leaders, the war will stop, and the church will guide everyone into the next dynasty. According to the church, the one major obstacle they still have is Ramza himself. That would make Delilah and Ramza enemies, except for the fact that he's not actually working for the church either, and according to him, he and Ramza are working toward the same goal. He proves that when Zalmo shows up to kill Ramza, and instead of joining in with the church's ally, he helps his old friend dispose of the heretic hunter for good. Once the fighting's over with, Ramza lets Delilah know that the other reason he came to Zeltenia was to find Orlando to get his help in revealing the church's true motives. He has the proof Orlando and Olan need to expose everything, and since he doesn't need the Germanic scriptures to free his sister now, he's willing to use them against the church. One of Delilah's assistants comes to let him know that Orlando and Gotana are both on their way to Bethla Garrison, and Gotana is bringing Delilah's Black Sheep Knights with him. That means it's probably too late for Ramza to catch up to Orlando to try and stop the unnecessary fighting. But he's still going to try, so he heads off, and Delilah lets him go because he knows what Ramza will do next, and it all falls in line with his own plans. While making his way to the garrison, Ramza runs into a shrine knight named Balk, who's put poison on the path of the Hokut Knights, a poison that'll make any soldier that breathes it in too sick to fight, which will give the Nanton Knights the upper hand when they get to the garrison. They'll take control of the fortress, making it easier for the assassins they have waiting there to finish off Gotana and Orlando. Since Ramza doesn't want the war to end like that, he kills Balk and moves on. He may not be fast enough though, because the plan to make Gotana and Orlando easier targets has already been put into motion. Someone planted some evidence to make it look like Orlando was plotting to overthrow Gotana himself. The high priest delivered the evidence to Gotana personally, and even though Orlando has worked for the man for 2 decades, he still has him arrested. Since he can't go to war without Orlando's soldiers, Gotana puts Delilah in charge of them and gives him the title of Holy Knight, while having no clue about how big of a mistake he's actually making. When Ramza gets to the garrison and asks to see Orlando, the guards assume that him and his crew are the assassins who've been hired to kill Gotana, so they try to arrest them and end up dead. The armies are getting ready to collide, so Ramza rushes off to see what he can do, but on Larg's side, things have already gone bad. Balk's poison has crippled the prince and a lot of his knights, so Dystarg takes the opportunity to kill the man. Zalbag is confused by the betrayal, but Dystarg has been working with some people who prefer to have the Baol family in charge, and the only way they could do that is to have Larg removed while making it look like one of Gotana's assassins killed him. Since he can't exactly turn on his own brother, Zalbag agrees to help him pin the murder on Gotana. While all of this is going on, Ramza decides that the only way to interrupt the battle is to flood the field. So he kills the people guarding the dam, opens the floodgates, and uses the distraction to join up with Olan and rescue Orlando from prison. The woman who had been working with Delilah helps, and since Gotana is planning on executing Orlando in a day, he doesn't have a choice but to go with Ramza to deal with the high priest. Olan wants to come with him, but Orlando sends him to Zeltenia so he can protect Ovelia. She's the rightful heir to the throne, and he wants to make sure that she lives to take it. Olan agrees and they all leave to carry out their mission. Delilah carries out his own and kills Gotana, as well as a fake Orlando so the church will think that he's dead and hopefully won't be prepared for what he and Ramza do next. Things didn't work out as well as the high priest had hoped anyway, because the deaths of both Larg and Gotana weren't enough to make the armies give him authority, and the Lion War continues, despite the fact that the 2 lions who started it are both dead. Dystarg doesn't plan on stopping the war until King Ornas is recognized as the rightful ruler of Ivalice, but what he didn't realize was that the church knew that he was the one who killed Larg. He thinks that he's in a position where he can beat the church with pure numbers, but the Shrine Knight Rafael doesn't think the man realizes just how much they know about the moves he's made to get into his current position. He had started his whole campaign by poisoning his father so he could take over the Baol family, which is not something that will go over well with most of his people, especially not with Zalbag. Rafael wasn't just sent to blackmail Dystarg though. He brought him a holy stone as a gift to buy his cooperation, since his loyalties are clearly for sale. He accepts the gift, but Zalbag heard the entire exchange, and he leaves to go and find out if his brother really did kill their father. While Zalbag's trying to figure out just how crazy his brother really is, Ramza makes it to Limberry Castle where he hopes to find his sister. But as soon as he gets there, he gets the same feeling that he had when he fought the last 2 Zodiac monsters. That's when Elmdor's 2 super strong female bodyguards show up and attack. They're just there to stall him while Elmdor and Vormov, who have both fully given their bodies to the Lucavi, discuss their plan to give themselves the ability to enter the mortal world without needing a host body. That involves bringing back a Lucavi known as the Bloody Angel. That creature can only be brought back in a very specific body in a very specific location. The body they needed is Ramza's sister, which they have, but they have to bring her to a place called Moron Death City, and they still haven't found a way to get there yet. Elmdor's people can only delay Ramza for a little while, but once he makes it into the castle, Elmdor sends Vormov off to find a way into the city, while he goes to deal with Ramza himself. He realizes really fast that he can't beat Ramza while he's keeping his human form, so he teleports to the underground cemetery where he transforms and uses his power to resurrect the dead.
Islud's sister comes in right when he changes, which proves to her that what Ramza said about the stones was true, and Elmdor lets her know that her father is a Lucavi too, because unlike her and her brother, Vormov's body was a viable vessel for them. Now that she knows that Ramza wasn't lying, she joins him in bringing down Elmdor and adding another Zodiac stone to his collection. The Lucavi from the legends were supposed to be immortal, super powerful creatures, but since Ramza's managed to kill 3 of them and they haven't just used their power to crush everyone, it makes it seem like the stories have exaggerated a little bit, or the Lucavi can't use their full power for some reason. Islud's sister decides to give Ramza the Zodiac stone that she had under the condition that he brings her with him, because she wants to know what her father is up to and why he gave Dystarg a stone. Ramza had no idea his brother had a stone, but now that he does, he wants to find out why too, so he gets ready to head off to find him. Following his stepfather's orders, Olan gets to Ovelia, but not without taking some pretty bad injuries in the process. Orlandu had been blamed for Gotana's death, so Olan tells her everything that happened in Bethla Garrison. He was about to let her know that Delita had killed Gotana, but Delita comes in and admits it himself. Ovelia isn't exactly happy about that, since she's starting to think that he's not really trying to clear the path for her to get the throne. But she does trust him a little bit, just not enough to avoid eavesdropping on his conversation with Olan. Delita plans on wiping out the Hokutan and killing the High Priest to clear the path for Ovelia to become queen, while getting rid of all of the people who have corrupted the world. Olan thinks he's crazy to try something so extreme, but the High Priest had expected something like that from him. So he told the woman who had been working with Delita to kill him if he ever looked like he was going to turn on them. Unfortunately for her, Delita kills her first. Zalbag's investigation proves that his brother had in fact killed their father with the same poison that had been used on Larg's army, so he heads to Egros castle to confront his brother. Ramza gets there in time to see Zalbag attack Dystarg for what he's done, but before he can kill him, Dystarg's knights show up to capture Zalbag. Ramza backs him up and they kill Dystarg, but when he dies, the Zodiac Stone resurrects him as a Lucavi, and he kills Zalbag before Ramza puts him down. With the battle over, the last of the pure-blood sons of the Baal family are gone, pretty much putting an end to the family's power and influence. Ramza's not exactly sad about that. All he cares about now is saving his sister. Delita likely won't have to kill the High Priest to complete his plan himself, because Vormov, Rafael, and Balk, who managed to survive his fight with Ramza, go and stab the priest themselves. They only work with him to get the Holy Stones, but since Ramza has most of them, there's no point in working with the man anymore. They agree to not finish him off if he tells them where the entrance to Morond is. Since he doesn't want to die, he lets them know that the holy city's entrance is at the bottom of Orban Monastery, blocked off by a magical seal. He doesn't know how to break the seal, but he thinks the spell is in the Germanic scriptures, which means Vormov once again has a reason to hunt for Ramza. The High Priest told them what they wanted, but instead of keeping their word, they stab him in the back, literally, before they leave. Since Alma wasn't at Limberry, Ramza decides that the only other place that Vormov could have brought her was the Moron Temple, which is the home of the High Priest. He can't exactly walk in there since they want to kill him, so he fights his way inside and finally comes face to face with Vormov, who wants the Germanic scriptures in exchange for Ramza's sister. He hands it over, and once Rafael sees that the spell he needs is inside, they attack Ramza. They realize pretty fast that they can't beat him, so they run away after Vormov summons Zalbag's soul, forcing Ramza to fight his dead brother while Vormov and the others head off to open the way to the city of the dead. The High Priest isn't fully dead when Ramza stumbles across him, and before he dies, he tells Ramza where Vormov and the others went, so it's back to Orban Monastery, the place where this entire thing all began. Ramza gets there while Rafael is in the process of opening the way to the city of the dead. Ramza beats him, but he doesn't stop him from completing the spell and teleporting them all to Morond. He dies from his wounds, but not before he destroys the entrance to the place, making it almost impossible for Ramza to ever make it home. He'll cross that bridge when he gets to it. Alma is somewhere in the city, so he heads off to find her. After cutting his way through Shrine Knights and the monsters that they have working with them, Ramza finds Vormov while he's trying to draw the strongest Lucavi, Ultima, into Alma's body. It's not working though. It takes a lot of blood and death to resurrect Ultima, which is the whole reason Vormov and the other Lucavi were trying to throw the world into chaos. He thought enough people had died for the summoning to work, but since that doesn't seem to be the case, he transforms into his Lucavi form and tries to kill Ramza. When he loses the fight, he sacrifices himself to complete the ritual, letting Ultima take over Alma's body. The merger isn't complete though, so the Virgo stone that Alma was holding helps separate her from the Lucavi. Ultima still has enough power to survive without a host, but not enough to beat Ramza, who she recognizes as a descendant of the person who beat her the last time. In a last-ditch effort to take down her enemies, she blows herself up and seemingly takes Ramza, his sister, and everyone else with her.
With all of Ivalice's major powers gone, Delilah marries Ovelia and becomes king and brings peace to Ivalice. But Ovelia thinks that he plans on killing her too, so she stabs him. He doesn't die, but he does kill her for attacking him. Meanwhile, Olan catches sight of Ramza and Alma, who survived the fight with Ultima, and head off to start new lives somewhere else while the rest of Ivalice thinks they're dead. This concludes the story of Final Fantasy Tactics. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it, comment, share, and subscribe. Grab a copy of my novel on your way out, and I'll see you all next time. Quick disclaimer, Baldur's Gate 3 is a massive game with tons of side stories and characters that while they have quests and plot points that span all 3 acts, they aren't necessarily pivotal to the main plot. In this video, I'll be covering what I see as the most likely canon path for the story, and that means some things won't be mentioned. If you don't hear me talk about your favorite side plot or I handle something in a way that you didn't, that doesn't necessarily mean either route is inherently wrong. We won't find out what the canon story is until Baldur's Gate 4 comes out in a decade or so, but for now, here's how I think the story is meant to play out. Hope you enjoy. The story starts with you and a lot of other people in a very messed up situation. You're all trapped on a Nautiloid, a Mind Flayer warship, and locked in pods where you're injected with Mind Flayer larvae in one of the most unpleasant ways possible. The things crawl into your eye and lodge themselves in your brain. The process will eventually turn you into a Mind Flayer, but before it can be completed, the ship is attacked by some dragon-riding Githyanki, which throws it off course. The damage they do causes the pods to open, which lets you escape, but you're not the only one to break free. Lae'zel, a Gith who went through the same unsanitary procedure that you did, sees you and goes to kill you since she thinks you're one of the Mind Flayer's slaves. But when the creature in your head links your mind to the one in hers, she realizes that you're another escapee. And since there's going to be a lot of fighting to get through the ship, she figures that the two of you teaming up will have a better chance of getting out of there and hopefully getting the bugs out of your brains before you transform into Mind Flayers. The change won't happen overnight, but it doesn't exactly take long, so you need to get off of the ship as fast as you can, and the best way to do that is to head to the helm and take over the whole thing. It won't be nearly as easy as it sounds, but it's the only thing that the two of you can do, so you head off. On the way, you pass another pod that has a woman trapped inside. She begs you not to leave her there, so against Lae'zel's wishes, you open the container. The newly freed woman calls herself Shadowheart, and when her mind links with yours, you realize that she's infected too. So after she grabs a weird object out of the pod that she won't tell you about, your group of 2 turns to 3 and you head to the helm. The place is in total chaos with Mind Flayers and demons fighting each other. One of them thinks you're thralls, so he tells you to connect the very disgusting tentacles on the clearly living ship to get them all out of there. You do it right when a dragon sticks his head in and sets fire to everything. The ship teleports somewhere, but it's pretty messed up after all of that, so it starts to crash. But you get knocked out of the thing before it hits the ground. You should have died from the fall, but something catches you before you become a skid mark on the beach, and you head off to figure out where you are. You find Shadowheart laying out the same way you were, way more alive than she should be. She has no idea how she's not dead, but she's not complaining, and she decides that since both of you need to find a way to get the Mind Flayer bugs out of your heads, sticking together is the best way to go. So the two of you head off to find someone who specializes in brain bug removal. You don't get far before you see a pale man who claims he's got one of those brain monsters cornered and he wants your help to kill it. He was actually lying so he could get the jump on you. He saw you on the ship and he's not sure whether or not you're trying to capture him. But when your minds link, he realizes that you're in the same boat that he is and you'll make a better ally than an enemy. His name is Astarion, and he had been in Baldur's Gate when the Mind Flayer snatched him, so he has no idea what the worm in his head is actually going to do to him. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your point of view, you let him know that the bugs are going to turn you all into Mind Flayers, so since you're looking for a cure, he decides to join you. Apparently surviving crashes from alien ships isn't all that uncommon, because your growing crew comes across a mage that apparently messed up a teleportation spell and got stuck in a rock. His name is Gale. And when you free him from what was probably going to be a very unpleasant death, he immediately figures out that you have a bug in your brain and decides to tag along with you to help find a cure because he's not all that fond of growing tentacles out of his face. Lae'zel survived the crash too, but she ended up getting locked in a cage by some tieflings who were debating whether or not they should kill her since one of their friends ran into some of her kind and they were all very murdery, not too pleasant people. When she sees you, she links her mind with yours and tells you to help her. Shadowheart is all for leaving the woman to her fate since she was perfectly fine with leaving her on the ship to die. But Lae'zel claims to know of a cure for your condition, so you decide to talk the tieflings out of killing her. They aren't exactly fighters anyway, so they didn't want to kill the woman, and they're more than willing to leave and handle other business. They have a camp nearby, and there's a druid there named Nettie who is a pretty good healer, so it may be worth going to see her if you can make it there without getting mauled by goblins. When they leave, Lae'zel lets you know that her people have a cure for the infection. All she has to do is find one of the spots where they set up a creche. That's where they hatch their eggs, train their children, and so on and so forth. So they'll definitely have the medical equipment there. Since one of the tieflings had run into some gith, Lae'zel figures that they've camped nearby, so she wants to go to the camp and talk to the man. Since you have quite a few reasons to head to the camp anyway, that's your next stop. But you get there right when a group of goblins show up to attack. Apparently some mercenaries had gone out with one of the druids, and whatever they were doing had gone wrong. So in a genius move, while being chased by goblins, the mercs went straight back to the druids' camp. You join in the fight to help deal with the thing, since that's the only way you'll be able to go inside and handle your own business. And obviously the leader of the refugees at the camp, a tiefling named Zevlor, is not happy that the mercenaries led the goblins to the camp since there are children there. Not only that, they lost the druid. They had gone to some ruins that turned out to be full of goblins, which means the man didn't lead a handful of the creatures to a place filled with helpless women and children. He potentially led a whole army there. The fact that he doesn't seem to care about that in the least ticks you off so much that you do the only rational thing, and that's punch him in the face. Zevlor was getting ready to do that himself, but since you saved him the trouble, he moves on to the more serious problem. He has to find a way to get his people to safety, because the druids are about to kick everyone out of the grove, and the goblin attack is only going to make them do it faster. They've already started doing a ritual to cut the grove off from the rest of the world, but Zevlor's people aren't fighters, so if they leave, the goblins or one of the other hundreds of violent creatures around the area will slaughter them all long before they reach Baldur's Gate. And Kaga, the new first druid, won't even talk to the man, but she might talk to you, so Zevlor asks you to try and buy them some time. Another man, Will, the same one who helped you all fight the goblins, has been trying to teach the tieflings how to fight so they can protect themselves on the road. But just like you, he was on the Nautiloid and has a tadpole in his head too. Your minds link and you see that Will had been chasing a demon through Avernus when he'd ended up getting snatched and implanted. He knows that he's going to end up changing, but he has to catch the demon first. Her name is Karlak, and she was a high-ranking warrior in the Blood War, so having her run around free to wreak havoc on regular people is not something Will can allow. He'd almost had her when he chased her onto the ship, but the whole getting captured thing kind of put a dampener on his mission. Since she sounds extremely dangerous and you apparently don't already have enough on your plate, you agree to join Will in his hunt for Karlak after you chat with the leader of the druids. You can tell that this is going to go well by the fact that the druids are arguing with a crowd of tieflings when you get there. One of their children stole something from the druids, and now Kaga is getting ready to punish the little girl. The tieflings are ready to fight to get the child free until one of the druids turns into a bear and gets ready to maul them. Not too many people are willing to stand face to face with a regular bear, let alone a druid one, so they back off and go to try to figure out another way to save their daughter. The druids nearly turn you away too, but Kaga wants to talk to you, so you get to meet the woman. She's not a nice person, something you see immediately since she's in the process of threatening a little girl with a snake. It's so bad that even another druid is telling her she's doing too much. The woman goes as far as to threaten him, especially when he mentions their missing leader Halsin. But you convince the woman to let the girl go. The only reason she had stolen the druid's idol is because she heard it was a part of the ritual that they were doing that was going to make her people have to leave. She figured that if they didn't have it, they'd have to cancel the ritual and her people wouldn't be sent off to certain death. Kaga is perfectly fine with sentencing all of the tieflings to death if it will make her life and the life of her people easier, but she is willing to give Zevlor and the others time to prep for their trip, as long as you go and help them get out of the grove as quickly as possible. You agree to do it, but first you have to hunt down Nettie to see if she can remove the bugs from your brains. When the druid realizes what's wrong with you, she takes you all into the back room where a dead elf is laid out on the table. The dark elf had attacked her and Halsin along with a small squad of goblins. When they had killed him, one of the mind flayer bugs climbed out of his ear. That was why Halsin had gone with the mercenaries in the first place. He wanted to find out what was going on with the goblins and the mind flayers and figure out how to deal with the problem. He knows more about the creatures than anyone, and he may have been able to help you get them out of your head, but since Nettie can't, she offers you some poison to drink the moment you start to show signs of changing. Nobody would agree to do that, and when you refuse, she tries to kill you. After you put an end to all of her living, your crew decides that tracking down Halsin may be your best bet at finding a cure, if he's even still alive. So you all leave Nettie's corpse in the vault and head back to Zevlor to let him know about Kaga before you head off to track down the druid. Zevlor's in quite a rough spot. The druids are willing to hurt children, so none of his people are safe there. But if they leave, they're at the mercy of the goblins. They're dead no matter what they do. But he does have an idea. Goblins aren't exactly the most organized group, so if their leaders suddenly disappeared, then the army would fall apart and the tieflings would be safe to leave. It's not an easy job, but since Halsin disappeared somewhere in the goblins' camp and you need him, you decide to kill two birds with one stone. With the plan in mind, your team leaves the Druid Grove and heads to the goblin camp to hopefully find Halsin and take down an entire army in the process. When your crew heads off to deal with the goblins, you all come face to face with the devil Karlach that Will was hunting. She looks about as big and scary as he claimed, but as soon as she starts talking, you realize that she's not nearly as bad as what he said she was, and he's not the only person who's hunting her. She had seen you on the Mind Flayer ship, which makes things a little easier since she's been injected with one of your brain bugs too, and that lets your minds link, and you get to see just how she ended up where she is. You see Karlach fighting in a very unpleasant world as a frontline soldier in the Blood War, but she wasn't fighting for either side like Will thought. She was trying to escape the war altogether. She's pretty sure she can convince the man that she's not who he thinks she is, if he stops trying to stab her for long enough for her to talk. Since he's at your camp at that moment, she may get her chance, but first she has another small problem she needs sorted out. She was a very good fighter, so Zariel, the archdevil that she was working for, isn't all that keen on letting her get away. She's been sending a lot of people after her to bring her back to Avernus, and a few of them are nearby, so she wouldn't mind having your help in putting them down. After that, she'll join you on your quest to get the bugs out of your heads. Since having a flaming tiefling warrior on your side has no real downsides in a world where lots of things want to kill you, you all take care of the people who were hunting her before heading back to your camp to get the inevitable confrontation with Will out of the way. The man is very determined to complete his mission to kill Karlach, but he's not above seeing reason, especially when the tadpole in her head links with his and shows him that she wasn't sent to the Sword Coast by the demons, and she's not planning on hurting anyone, except for the people who deserve it. Now that he knows that, he can't bring himself to kill her, which is good for Karlach, but not so much for him since he'll have to answer to the one who gave him the mission, and he knows that she won't be happy about him going against her orders. He's not wrong. His patron shows up when he refuses to do the deed, and she's not exactly what you'd expect when you take in the fact that Will comes off as the do-gooder Boy Scout type. His patron is a demon named Mazora who Karlach knows very well, and is not all that fond of. Will signed a contract that binds him to the woman in exchange for power, but part of the deal was that he'd only hunt monsters. Since Karlach's not a monster, he technically shouldn't have to kill her, but anyone who's ever heard of deals with demons know that you should always read the fine print because there's always a loophole in there. Will's contract says that he'll only be ordered to kill demons, heartless creatures, and soulless ones. Karlach's heart got replaced with an infernal engine, which makes her heartless according to the contract. So since Will broke it, Mazora punishes him by mutating him into a weird half-demon creature. What makes this so bad for him is not only is he still bound by the rest of the terms of the contract, but not even Mazora can undo the spell that she put on him. So even if he gets out of his contract, he'll always have demon horns. It's gonna make it real hard for people to trust him when he swoops in to save the day. But since it can't be changed, he has to deal with it. Plus he got off easy because Mazora could have just taken his soul for what he did. Either way, there's nothing to be done about it now, so you all head off to the goblin camp, only to be stopped by a weird man named Raphael. He proves to be more than a man shortly after he shows up by snapping his fingers and taking you all to his home where he turns into a very dangerous looking devil. He says that he can remove the bugs from your heads, and he may very well have the power to do exactly what he says, but after seeing how Will's deal with Mazora is going for him, it's very easy to reject the man's offer. He's not upset. In fact, he expected you to turn him down this time, but since you likely won't find another way to free yourselves, he knows you'll be willing to deal with him eventually. But for now, he sends you back so you can get back to your mission to hunt for Halsin. Apparently, a lot of things want to stop you from tracking down the druid, because while you're sleeping, you wake up to Astarion trying to bite you. Turns out he's a vampire, which was pretty obvious aside from the fact that he's been walking around in the sunlight like a regular person. That's a side effect of the bug in his head, because under normal circumstances he would be very crispy by now. Normally he only eats animals, but with all of the fighting he's been doing, he needs something a little more filling. He would have told you, but he couldn't be 100% sure you wouldn't have just stabbed him. Honestly, getting caught in the act of trying to bite you was a much better way to die. But once he promises not to try to nibble on anyone else in the camp, you all finally get back to your hunt for the druid, and what is hopefully a cure for your very unpleasant condition. After a whole lot of unforeseen trials and tribulations, the crew finally reached the goblin camp. They're obviously not willing to let you in alive at first, but a strange symbol pops up on the goblin's face, and it resonates with the bug in your head, letting you manipulate the goblin's mind.
The minute the goblin feels your touch on his mind, he recognizes you as something called a true soul, and he's more than willing to answer all of your questions. He doesn't know who Housen is, but if he was caught with the thieves, then he's either dead or they have him locked up in their facility waiting to get tortured. The goblins are in the middle of a party celebrating the fact that they captured a duke on their last raid, so they'll be too drunk to pay a whole lot of attention to you and your crew while you wander around. While it's true that the bugs in your head let you mess with the goblins' minds, something Astarion is more than eager to try again, the fact that this very useful ability came from the bugs that you're trying to get rid of makes Shadowheart think that using their powers is a bad idea. She's not exactly wrong since you don't know too much about them, so you agree to hold off on using the powers, at least for now. With the camp and your potential cure finally only a short distance away, the tadpoles in your entire group's head start broadcasting a voice into your minds that's so loud that it drops you all. It controls your minds in the same way that you had done to the goblin, but 1,000 times stronger, meaning that any chance you had of blocking it out is gone. The voice in your head shows you 3 people, an elf, a human, and a pale woman that is some other race entirely. The voice calls them its chosen, the people who carry out its will on Faerun. It wants you to join them on their hunt for an artifact that just so happens to be in Shadowheart's pocket. There's no telling why the voice wants the thing, but you get an idea when it activates on its own and pushes the voice out of your heads. Shadowheart has absolutely no idea what caused the relic to go off the way that it did. Her orders were to steal the thing and bring it back to Baldur's Gate, where a group of Shar followers are waiting for her. A smaller group of them had been sent out to get the thing, but she's the only one who lived. She doesn't know much more about the mission since Shar worshippers get their memories removed to keep them from spilling Shar's secrets. In other words, you all have a very powerful, mysterious artifact that some very powerful people are after, and you don't even know why. After that near-death experience, you all decide to take a moment to recover before you step into the hostile goblin camp. But that break gets interrupted when the symptoms from your brain bugs finally start to kick in. Lae'zel gets ready to put an end to all of you to keep you from turning into mind flayers, but you convince the woman to give you all more time to find a cure before she decides that the time is right to self-delete. It's a good thing that you managed to get her to stop, because a strange woman who looks a lot like Khaleesi shows up in your dream, and she stops your transformation. You've heard her voice before because she's the same person who kept you from becoming a skid mark when you fell out of the ship. She doesn't have a whole lot of time, but she promises that you won't turn into mind flayers, at least as long as she's around. She also tells you that it's a good idea to start using the powers that the bugs are giving you. From what she says, you'll need those powers to save both you and her. A battle is going on that will determine the fate of the entire world, and according to the mysterious woman, your side isn't winning at the moment, but you have the power to change that. She'll tell you more later, but for now she needs to get back to the battle, and you need to wake up. Apparently you're not the only one of your group to have dreams about a strange person offering to protect them, while also trying to convince them to use the creatures that's been stuck into their heads. Some of your crew thinks it's a good idea, while others aren't all that sure you should trust a weird dream visitor, but for the moment there's not all that much you can do, so you all finally head to the goblin camp where there hopefully won't be any more interruptions. The guards at the heart of the camp aren't all that eager to let strangers wander through their stronghold, and since fighting your way through isn't exactly the most high IQ idea, you decide to use your mind-controlling powers to help you get inside, where you come face to face with the first of the goblins' leaders, Priestess Gut, who the others are calling a true soul because, like you, she has a mind flare bug in her head, one that she is very good at using, which means your plan to hunt down Housen may be even more difficult than you thought. The goblin priestess Gut immediately recognizes you as a true soul when the creature in her head links with yours and shows her glimpses into your mind. The link works both ways, so you get to see her getting orders from one of the chosen that you had seen when the Absolute nearly took over your mind. But even as you try to dig deeper, you only catch bits and pieces. Something in your mind seems to be affecting your powers, and Gut offers to help you fix them since she thinks you're one of them. She takes you into her private chambers alone, which lets you put an end to the woman without alerting the others, and that lets you keep searching the place for Housen without having to fight everyone. You find the druid still in his bear form in the dungeon of the camp, where some goblins are doing the very same thing of throwing rocks at a captured animal. When he realizes that you're going to help him, he breaks out of the cell, killing one of the goblins with the falling gate. Then he joins you in finishing off the rest of his captors in the prison. He's very grateful for the help, although he thinks you're a little crazy for helping him when you couldn't possibly have known that he wouldn't have tried to maul you too. Not to mention the fact that anybody coming into a temple full of goblins has to be a few crayons short of a full box. It doesn't take him long to notice the fact that you have a mind flare bug inside of your head. But the fact that you know it's there and aren't serving the Absolute like the true souls proves that you're different. He's been studying them for a while, and from what he's learned, someone is using magic to control people who have been infected. He can't undo the magic, but he thinks he can help you since he's found out where they come from. It's a place called Moonrise Towers. The goblins take their prisoners there, and true souls come out, so Halcyon figures that's where the spell to control the tadpoles comes from, and you have to undo that magic if you want to take the bugs out of your head without dying. The big druid is willing to come with you if you can help him finish off the goblin leaders. Since you were planning on doing that anyway and you've already dealt with Gut, you team up with him to take down Minthara and draw Ragzlin. With all three of the leaders taken care of, you all leave to head back to the grove to tell Zevlor and his people that they're safe. That night, you get another visit from your mysterious dream visitor, and she is very happy to see that you've been using the tadpole's powers. She's also happy that Halcyon didn't try to remove the parasite since it would have killed you. The magic that's around the thing will kill you if you try to take it out at all, so your only chance is to go and deal with the source of the spells. Unfortunately, not even your mysterious protector knows how to do that. The parasites make the infected people hear a voice of a being called the Absolute, and it convinces them that it's a god, which means the more people who get infected, the further the cult of the Absolute will spread. The upper ranked members of the cult have brain bugs like you, and they brand the lesser members so they can use the tadpoles to control them. And those tadpoles are how they get the orders that they're forced to obey. One of those orders will be the one that forces you all to transform, and that order will make all of the infected turn into mind flayers instantly. The fact that this unknown person seems to have a lot of information on the subject raises more questions than it answers. She claims that she was an adventurer like you who got infected with a brain bug, and now she's trying to free herself just like you. She also claims that she almost got free once. Her last attempt didn't work, but she thinks that using you to hunt for the source of the bugs while she keeps you from changing can help free both of you. The power she's using to protect you was something that she stole from someone else, and they want it back. Eventually they'll get it back, which means you're on a timer, so your unnamed assistant sends you back to the waking world so you can head to Moonrise Towers and hopefully find out where the brain bugs really come from and deal with it. Just like before, your companions had the same dream as you, and even though going into the heart of the cult doesn't sound like a great idea, it's the only one you have, so that'll be your next stop once you leave the grove. As per usual, nothing works out the way that it should. Lae'zel finally sees the relic that's been protecting you, and she recognizes it as something that belongs to her people. Common sense isn't all that strong in the Gith woman, so she wants the relic so she can take it back to her people, even though it's the only thing keeping you all alive. Since Shadowheart has the thing, Lae'zel wants to know how the woman got it and why. Since she won't tell her, Lae'zel challenges Shadowheart to a duel the next morning. The Gith can obviously fight, so Shadowheart does the smart thing and catches Lae'zel while she's sleeping. Honor in combat is nice in theory, but if someone threatens you, don't fight them on their terms. Plenty of honorable people have been buried because they tried to play by rules that only they were following. Fights aren't martial arts tournaments or boxing matches. Anything goes, and Shadowheart understands that. She was perfectly fine with killing Lae'zel and telling everyone else that the woman had started turning. Lucky for the Gith, you woke up when you did, and managed to convince them to stop acting like you're not all a part of the same team. Lae'zel accepts that for now, so you all head back to the Druid Grove so you can continue your trip to Moonrise Towers, and hopefully get a step closer to a cure for your pending transformation. On your way back to the Druid's Grove, your crew sees what is always a bad thing to run across in any fantasy world. A dragon is flying right overhead. Dragons, some of them at least, work for the Githyanki, which means some of them aren't far away. It doesn't take you all that long to find them. They're right in the middle of a conflict with some members of the Flaming Fist that ends pretty quickly when the dragon and its rider, Kithrak Voss, come swooping down and burn them to a crisp. They are hunting for a weapon of some kind, but that doesn't matter to Lae'zel. Since her people are nearby, that means a creche is nearby too, so she wants to go and talk to them. They don't exactly seem friendly to non-Gith, but Lae'zel is confident that they won't attack you since she's there, so you all follow her. She clearly overestimated her own importance, because Voss not so subtly threatens to skin her for even talking to him like they're equals. Once he puts her in her place, he lets her know that some thieves stole a weapon from a crashing Nautiloid, a weapon that just so happens to be the relic that's in Shadowheart's pocket. Lae'zel agrees to join the hunt, but she doesn't tell the man that you all have the weapon because Voss would have likely killed you all for it. He did say that a creche wasn't all that far away before he flies off, but with the way the Gith acted, going into one of their strongholds right now isn't all that high on your priority list. So instead, you make your way back to Halcyon and the Druid's Grove. Zevlor and the Tieflings heard the good news, and they've all packed up and are ready to leave, but they'll camp with you and your friends tonight to celebrate before they head off. As for Halcyon, he's in the process of dealing with Kaga. He's more than a little ticked off that the woman had tried to seal the grove with the Rite of Thorns. He was going to exile her, but instead he demotes her so she can get re-educated on what it means to be a druid. Her attitude says that re-education might not work, but for now there's more important things to worry about. After doing a bit of celebrating with the tieflings, Halsin makes good on his promise to help. He knows how to get to Moonrise Towers, but it's not exactly an easy trip. The tower is a place covered in a curse that kills and mutates anything and anyone inside of it. Everything in the Shadow Curse land is dangerous, and that says nothing on where you'll have to travel through to get there. There's a path over some mountains that you can use to get there, or you can go through the Underdark. There's a tunnel into the Underdark in the Goblins' camp, which is what Halsin had been looking for when he got captured. A long time ago, a man named Ketheric Thorm made a secret base filled with an army of Dark Justiciars, the elite followers of Shar. Aridin and the other mercenaries had been sent to find a relic called the Night Song that's supposed to be down there. Ketheric had planned on attacking both the Temple of Selûne, since she's Shar's greatest enemy, and Moonrise Tower at the same time. But he'd gotten beaten before he could complete his mission. That's likely the most direct route to the tower. And since Shadowheart seems very interested in learning more about the Dark Justiciars, you decide to travel through the Underdark, and Halsin joins you. With the Goblin camp mostly cleared out, it doesn't take long to find your way into the Underground Temple and the Underdark. The place is extremely dangerous, filled with dark dwarves, plant people who use corpses to make more of their kind, and large animals that travel underground and attack you from below. The place is so dangerous that it may have been better to travel over the mountains, but it's a bit too late for that now. So after battling the evil dwarves at the request of the plant creatures, stealing the dwarves' boat and killing more of their friends, you and your crew reach the Grimforge. A group of cultists and some hired dwarves are trying to get into an old temple through there, but during their search, the true soul in charge, Nier, caused a rock slide and got trapped. The plant men want him dead for what he's done to their people, and Thula, one of the slaves who escaped, asks you to free the gnomes. So since taking out a true soul can't do anything but help your position, you kill the man and his followers with the help of the underpaid dwarves, free the slaves, and make your way to the Shadow Curse land. Before you step through into the very unpleasant path to Moonrise Towers, you come across Elminster Almar, the man who is arguably the most famous and powerful spellcaster in existence, and he's been sent by Mystra herself to find Gale for a very important reason that he won't talk about until he's had a bite to eat. So you delay your trip to Moonrise for just a little bit longer so you can find out just what the man wants from Gale, and hopefully it's not something that will make your already difficult journey even harder. This concludes the story of Act 1 of Baldur's Gate 3. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it, comment, share it, and subscribe. Donate to the channel if you can, and I'll see you all next time. Alfrey Holland doesn't have what you'd call a good life. Things have been rough for her, and that's led to her having quite a few run-ins with the law in her 21 years of life. You could say it was fate, since her parents abandoned her near the Holland Tunnel in New York, and the very first people who found her were actually cops, so technically she's been at home in handcuffs from day one. And the fact that she keeps stealing things is the reason for her repeat visits to prison. You would think that since she has that much practice as a thief, she would have learned to avoid getting caught, but apparently she hasn't learned that lesson yet. She has a very high chance of never learning that lesson, since her current run-in with the law puts her on strike number 3, which usually gets you locked up for as long as the judge wants, just to keep them from having to deal with you anymore. But this particular judge is well aware of Frey's crappy life situation and decides to give her one last chance to get her stuff together. But she says if she sees her in court again, she's going to put her away for life, which means it's in her best interest to not do any more crimes. But that might be kinda difficult, because while she's headed home to her only family, which is a cat, she gets snatched by the group of people who she was supposed to be stealing a car for. Because she doesn't have it, they beat the crap out of her, without leaving a bruise, so either the woman hitting Frey has hands made of feathers, or Frey's face is made of bricks. Either way, she runs away using some skills she picked up from playing Dying Light, and manages to lose them in the maze of streets. She gets back to her house, which is actually an abandoned apartment complex. They really drove home how much her life sucks, but she's planning on changing that very soon. Apparently she's not as bad of a thief as I thought she was, because she does have a bag full of money that she plans on using to move. She's gonna take her cat and leave first thing in the morning, after she gets a bit of sleep. Unfortunately, things don't work out quite how she planned. Frey wakes up to her apartment being on fire, and because her cat is more important to her than her money, she grabs her and jumps out of the window that has a nice big message painted on it saying "Found you," letting Frey know that the people who chased her were the ones who set her building on fire and sent her plans for escape up in smoke. Not really having anyone else to turn to, she takes her cat to the judge who let her go. The way she looks has the other woman worried, but Frey promises that after she takes care of a few things, she'll be back for her cat. But even the judge has a feeling that whatever Frey's planning will probably get her killed. While she's trying to figure out her next move, and seemingly debating just ending it all in the same spot where she was found as a baby, she's drawn by a glowing light toward a weird-looking bracelet that's sitting inside of an abandoned building.
The thing looks valuable, so of course she heads in and touches it. It wraps itself around her arm and snatches her through a portal to somewhere that's definitely not New York. Before she can jump back through it, it closes behind her, leaving her trapped somewhere very strange looking. She clearly has no idea where she is, but the bracelet can apparently talk, and it tells Frey that she's in a place called Athia. She doesn't react well to having a talking piece of jewelry hooked to her arm, and no matter how hard she pulls on it or beats the thing against a wall, she can't get it off. The thing is bonded to her and talking directly into her mind, which means if anyone sees her talking to it, they'll just think she's crazy. To make matters worse, Athia isn't exactly safe, something Frey figures out as soon as she sees the giant dragon that's looking around right outside of the castle. It immediately makes her realize that her life in New York wasn't all that bad, and she'd rather be homeless dealing with gangbangers than a dragon. But she can't go back the way she came, which means she has to find a new way home. And that means traveling through this strange world with the bracelet, who also doesn't have a clue how he even ended up on Earth. What he does know is that he originally came from Athia, but he hadn't been born there. He was from another world like Frey, but when he got to Athia, the 4 women who ruled the place, called the Tantas, were already in a semi-war with one another. And since all of them had unique powers, it wasn't a good idea to get on any of their bad sides, which Cuff did and ended up getting turned into a bracelet. One of the many things that Cuff can do is sense things that are nearby, and he senses a small settlement where Frey can rest and plan her next move, so that's where they head. While they're on their way there, Frey sees an animal grazing and does something that no normal person would do. See, there are plenty of people who deal with stray cats and dogs. I'm not one of them, but I can understand it. I don't know anybody who would see something that's as big as a bear out in the wild and try to get its attention, while the talking bracelet they have on is telling them not to mess with it. But Frey ignores Cuff's warnings and calls out to the thing, that turns around and shows that it's more mouth than animal. It tries to eat her, but being linked to Cuff lets Frey knock the thing away with her mind. After she kills it with her newfound powers, something she's just as excited about as anyone else would be, she realizes that there was more than one of the weirdly mutated monsters. She puts them down, and despite getting more confirmation that the place is anything but safe, she isn't in the least bit more cautious as she makes her way to the settlement that Cuff had mentioned. When she gets closer to it, she can see a weird fog in the air that feels strange enough to make her want to go back the way she came. But other than making her nervous, the fog's not really doing all that much to her. Since going back the way she came won't really help her all that much, she keeps going into the settlement that's abandoned aside from more mutated animals that are all doing a good job of making her miss her life of poverty. After nearly being eaten by an even bigger creature which gets the attention of an entire pack of them, Frey decides that it might be a better idea to just run away. Fortunately for her, her power she got lets her run a lot faster than normal, and mixing that with her Prince of Persia skills helps her avoid the monsters and get deeper into the very empty town. Not only are there no people, but everything seems to have been badly damaged either by fighting or the creepy mist. But even though she doesn't find any other people, she does find a house that's relatively undamaged and void of all forms of critter that does have one thing that she desperately needs: a place to rest for a minute. She gets a little bit of sleep, but a storm made up of the creepy mist covers the town. Frey calls it the break after she sees it cause a pack of animals to break apart. After seeing what happened to the animals, she doesn't want to stick around to see if this much more intense version of the mist can actually hurt her. But her path out of the ruins gets blocked by the dragon that she saw earlier, and she's forced to do the one thing that she had really tried to avoid, and that's fight it. Frey does the best that she can with her new powers, but the dragon is way too much for her to handle. It picks her up and carries her off, likely planning on taking her to its nest so it can eat her slowly. So since she's likely dead either way, she shoots the dragon so it'll drop her, since she has a better chance of surviving the fall than any more time with the creature. She does survive, and it turns out that the place where the dragon dropped her was a city with actual people. You would think that would be a good thing, but seeing as how Frey came to the city through an area where nothing can survive but monsters, they detain her and take her at spear point to the council chambers, where the leaders of the city and most of the people have gathered to find out who Frey is and what to do with her. She's not exactly cooperative, which doesn't help her much, and even Cuff tells her that she should probably think a little bit more before she talks, but she ignores his advice. The people think she's talking to demons since they can't hear Cuff, and she doesn't make her situation better by saying she's from Hell's Kitchen. That actually makes some of the council members think that she survived the miscorruption because she's Hellspawn, which makes them logically want to execute her. But a local woman named Auden Keene thinks that Frey might be more useful to the city of Sepal alive. Since she survived the corruption, she might be able to help them figure out a way to do the same. Some of the council members agree, so they won't execute Frey unless she proves to be a threat. They will, however, lock her up in a tower prison until they figure out what to do with her. She's not exactly a fan of going to jail when she actually didn't do anything, so she resists and is knocked out and locked up anyway. The constant bouts of bad luck have really started to get to Frey. She misses New York, something that Cuff thinks is weird since she had really wanted to escape the place, but in her defense, nothing had tried to eat her there, which I do think is a valid reason to want to go back home. After thinking about it for a moment, she realizes that she can use her new magic to break out of the prison, but Cuff warns her that if the people see her using those powers, they'll hang her for being a heretic. And while she does have abilities, she can't fight the entire city. Lucky for her, she doesn't have to. The woman Auden who had defended her drugged the guards and came to free her. She definitely wants something from Frey, but since her choices are follow the weird woman or rot in prison, she chooses to go with her. The guards are pretty terrible at their jobs, so Frey and Auden move through the city without all that much trouble. The two of them don't even have to be all that quiet, so Auden lets Frey know a little bit about the world while they splinter cell their way around the guards. When the break appeared, all of the people in the villages fled since it meant death to all who came in contact with it. They came to Sapal, and it's basically the last city full of living people in all of Athia. The upper city is where the rich people live because it keeps them further away from the break if it spreads to the city. It's also the only part of the city that looks like people actually spent money on the buildings. When they get to the lower city, Auden formally introduces herself, since the guards apparently don't come to the area even to hunt for escaped prisoners. Auden's father, Robian, was a well-respected scholar, and her mother was a military general, so both of her parents were people who spent their lives helping others, and that kind of rubbed off on Auden. Frey is more interested in the fact that Auden lives over a bar and has some food, but she loses interest in all of that pretty fast when Auden tells her that she freed her so she could help save her homeland. She's not interested in whatever the woman has in mind, but that changes when Auden lets her know that she knows about the portal that brought Frey to Athia, and she might be able to help her get home. That piques Frey's interest, so she'll listen to what the woman has to say if she gets her a drink. After a little girl tries to snatch Frey's phone, which doesn't die for the entirety of the game, I might add, Auden tells Frey what she wants from her. Robian had studied portals called the Torana quite a bit, and Auden has all of her father's notes on it. She'll give them to Frey if she finds her father's notes on the break. The notes are out somewhere in the break where her father had been working when he died, and since no one can travel through the stuff and live except for Frey, she's Auden's only hope of getting them. Frey will do it if Auden shows her proof that she does have information on the portals. Her father had been working out in Praenos, quite a ways away from Sapal, but he'd brought Auden to the city to keep her safe while he went back to finish his work. That was 20 years ago, and during that time the break covered everything outside of the city. Her dad had been close to finding a way to reverse the break, and Auden is trying to pick up where he left off. She shows Frey that she does in fact have his notes on the portals, so she agrees to go and get Robian's research on the break after she gets a bit of sleep, because this is going to be a very long journey. Auden gives her a place to rest and some clothes that'll help her blend in, as well as a map that'll lead her where she needs to go. And she heads off on what will definitely be a very, very difficult mission. And that's where we're going to stop for today. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, subscribe, ding that notification bell, and I'll see you all next time.